Wilma Manns' affair at the country club shatters her marriage to George Manns. The fallout is brutal. Wilma blames George's father, Jerome Manns, and plots revenge. But when Jerome's will leaves Wilma with nothing, her desperation spirals. Garrett Manns and Beatrice Manns are caught in the crossfire. How far will Wilma go to reclaim what she's lost? Garrett Manns walked into his mother's kitchen late again for dinner. The 19-year-old was strong and healthy, but always had a hard time being on time. This habit made his mother, Wilma Manns, very upset, and her anger could be hard to handle. Wilma was not an easy person to live with, and when she was mad, it was tough to get along with her. Many years before, Jerome Manns, Garrett's grandfather, had completely stopped talking to Wilma, his only son's mother. George, who had once been married to Wilma, still kept in touch with Garrett. He wished he could spend more time with him. In fact, Garrett was late for dinner that night because he had been visiting his grandfather. They had once again sneaked off for a visit while walking through the woods by a stream where they were fishing. Like many fishing and hunting trips, this one had little real fishing and a lot of drinking and sharing tall tales. As usual, the fishermen lost track of time while they drank the beers from Jerome's cooler. Luckily for Garrett, Jerome believed he was old enough to enjoy drinks responsibly, with an adult around, no matter what the law said. Of course, this did not make Garrett's mother happy, but then nothing probably would. Garrett's main father figure was his grandfather, since his real father had passed away after he and Wilma split up almost 16 years ago. If it weren't for financial reasons, his mother would have kept Garrett far away from his grandfather. Even letting Garrett visit his grandparents bothered her, given how they felt about each other. She kept in touch with them because she needed free childcare and some extra money now and then. After her divorce, she felt angry that she had to go to work. She never admitted that she had been unfaithful with a few guys. Well, it was more than one, but she was only caught once, right? That happened at the country club, and it was the reason for her divorce. She blamed Jerome for helping Garrett's dad during the divorce and making things hard for her. In the end, she got almost nothing from it. Even though she got half of the shared belongings, she still felt cheated. How could she know that both cars and the house really belonged to Jerome and his company instead of George? Jerome always talked about our house and our cars. On top of that, she didn't receive any support money because her paycheck was actually bigger than George's. She found a way to blame Jerome for that too. After all, he owned the business they both worked at, right? Wilma was able to convince the court that she was the better parent and should take care of the children. So she did get a small amount of child support. But Garrett stopped needing it over a year ago when he turned 18. Now, it felt like she was just tossing her hard-earned money into a bottomless pit. She had the same job for 16 years and had not received any raises, which she found very frustrating. Was it Jerome's fault? No, it was all his fault. Things went downhill when she got caught being unfaithful. She never let Garrett forget that either. After all, he was a man too. So it was partly his fault, wasn't it? Even before she reached high school, people already talked about how cold and calculating Wilma could be. George's friends and family warned him not to marry her, but he was completely taken by her looks. Of course, part of the reason he felt this way was because he was very drawn to her charm and personality. She was able to keep her true self hidden from him until they got married and had their son, Garrett. It was only then that he realized he had married someone very different from what he thought. His friends warned him about getting married. He put up with her bad behavior for nearly 4 years before he had enough. He only decided to get a divorce after he found out she was unfaithful. Once the divorce started, Wilma became even more difficult and demanding. She believed she deserved a life of comfort and luxury because she thought of herself as one of the beautiful people. She felt entitled to anything she wanted, even if her husband George did not agree. She believed that just because he was the one making money, that didn't mean she should have to work harder or give up anything. After all, he promised to take care of her when they got married. Since he went back on that promise, she thought the family should just take over and give her what she wanted. She expected George to provide for her. Sadly for her, Jerome did not agree to do that. Over the years, Wilma often thought she should have realized she would be left alone. It seemed to run in her family. During the Great Depression, a man owned a small bank in town. Garrett's great-grandfather was killed during a robbery. and his great-great-grandfather closed the bank out of sadness. He was so heartbroken over losing his son that he locked the bank after the police finished their investigation and never opened it again. He made sure the customers' money was moved to another small bank nearby. If the customers didn't make other plans, he actually sold the bank, but kept the building and all its things. The new bank only bought the customer accounts and debts. The outcome was the same. He simply closed the doors and walked away from the bank, leaving the workers without jobs. In Wilma's thoughts, he simply closed the business and walked away, just like George did with their marriage. She knew the family had money, but they didn't step up to help her, like they should have. She often took her anger out on Garrett and Jerome. Even her parents said they couldn't help, claiming they didn't have the money. She knew that wasn't true, but what could she do? At least both sets of grandparents made sure little Garrett and his younger sister Beatrice were cared for. Wilma had to use her small salary to pay for herself and a few household bills. It had been 15 years since his father left home, and Garrett barely remembered him. George Mans did leave after the divorce, but he didn't leave his family on purpose. He died in an accident while moving to another state for work to be closer to his grandchildren. Despite Wilma's behavior, her grandfather chose not to completely abandon her. He kept paying child support as the court said he had to, acting like it was his son's money. Garrett thought that if it weren't for his grandfather, he would hardly remember his dad at all, and if he did, it wouldn't be anything nice. His mom often spoke badly about both his father and grandfather. She criticized his dad for leaving her after the divorce. She also blamed his grandfather for making her work to take care of herself. She believed she should get the money from the insurance policies instead of it being saved for the children. Garrett wasn't living up to his full potential. He was very smart, but he didn't have the drive to succeed. In other words, he was very content to stay in a place of average achievement. Going hunting, fishing, and camping mattered much more to him than school and work. Of course, trying to impress girls was just as important to him as eating and drinking, especially when he could find someone to get him something to drink. He was going to the local junior college and getting mostly average grades. Soon he planned to transfer to a nearby four-year college to work towards a degree. He honestly said he was in school mainly to keep his mom and grandparents happy and to avoid getting a full-time job. Garrett did have a part-time job as a cleanup helper for a local building contractor, which helped him earn most of his spending money. He liked the work he did there. It didn't require much thinking, and it wasn't too physically demanding. He enjoyed it, but he wasn't sure if he wanted to do that kind of job for his future. He even liked being able to do some of the simpler tasks that a carpenter or another builder would usually do. He was learning a lot from his job and found the work very interesting, especially the remodeling projects. That evening, when Garrett walked into the kitchen, he faced his mother, who was clearly upset. She confronted him as he let the door slam behind him. "Garrett, where have you been?" she shouted. "You were supposed to be home before I got off work, and it's clear you weren't. None of the chores I left for you are done. You haven't even started making dinner like I asked you to. And look at you. You're a mess. It looks like you have river water and mud on your clothes, not just dirt from the construction site. You went fishing again, didn't you? And you smell terrible. I guess you found some beer to drink while wasting time again. What will I do with you, Garrett, if you don't stop goofing off? No good woman will take you seriously. A woman who is worth your time wants someone who can give her nice things in life. Now go upstairs and clean yourself up." Garrett was so used to his mother's comments that he just shrugged it off in his mind as he started walking upstairs. His sister Beatrice came down the stairs as usual. She took up all the space and pushed Garrett aside, saying, "Get out of my way, you idiot!" In Garrett's eyes, Beatrice was even nastier than his mother. Only the really popular kids at school could stand her. She and her friends made life hard for everyone else who crossed their path. She was really beautiful, and she knew it. She expected everyone else to admire her too. As the head cheerleader, she helped control others around her. Garrett let me move past him without saying anything while he headed up the stairs. He thought to himself, "I have to find a way to get out of here. I'm tired of the attitude in this house." He wondered if he could find a better job, but he knew it would mean working harder for a little more pay. He felt frustrated. Something had to change soon. He worried about how much longer his mom would let him stay without contributing more to the household. She had already started hinting that he needed to help with expenses and look for a better job. Life went on for a few more weeks. Garrett endured living with his mother and sister, going through boring classes at school and counting the days until the weekend when he could escape to the woods or the streams. Garrett and his grandfather had some great spots to fish and camp in the woods by a stream on his grandfather's small farm during the July 4th weekend. Once again, Garrett and his grandfather went camping and fishing. It was a nice way to celebrate the country's birthday, unlike what Wilma and Garrett's ex-girlfriend thought. They all thought Garrett was being unfair when he said he wouldn't stay in town to help the three women and their friends at the party at Wilma's parents' house. When he said no to helping Grandfather Strom bring Carrie and cook for the event, the three women got upset with him. His girlfriend, Pauline, told him he needed to be at the party for her and his sister, or she would find someone else to take his place. He didn't show up, and she did find a replacement. The party blunder was just another event in a long list of things that Garrett believed were unfair actions from uncaring, selfish women. They didn't care that he and his grandfather always spent the 4th of July together fishing and camping. None of them even said thank you for all the work he did to get ready for the party. He even asked Pauline to join him for a day of fishing, but she turned him down in a harsh way. Garrett sat by the fire as the sun went down on the 4th, eating freshly fried cod, fried potatoes and onions, and pork and beans while chatting with his grandfather. He had just finished explaining his problems with women in his life and took a big sip of beer to wash down his last bite. Grandfather Jerome leaned back, looking at Garrett for a moment, then said, "Garrett, I'm not sure what advice to give you, son. I can share some advice that might be useful, but you need to listen closely. Some of what I say might not be the best because of how I feel about your mother. I know I've gotten angry whenever I heard you say bad things about her and your sister. You really need to show respect to your mother, son. She brought you into this world and took care of you for 19 years. Now, you have a sister who also needs your support and care. Family is important. With that said, I have to be honest. I don't think your mother is behaving well, and she has taught your sister to act the same way. It's hard for me to treat them kindly, and that's the truth. Your grandma felt similarly before she passed away. We just tried to treat them as we would want to be treated and lived our own lives as best as we could, despite the difficulties. You need to do the same now, especially with the girlfriends you keep meeting and losing. If you really want help and are willing to listen, I can try to assist you. First of all, son, there's a saying that true beauty comes from within. You tend to date beautiful women, usually friends of your sisters or girls from school who seem fancy. Now, don't get me wrong. Many of these women are good, nice people. Just because they are pretty doesn't mean you shouldn't date them. But you should look for more than just looks. Find someone who is kind, caring, honest, and shares your interests. I don't think you've done that yet. It's important to focus on what's inside more than what's outside. You also need to think about your future. Garrett, you're smart, but your schoolwork doesn't show it. You need to do better in your studies. You have to figure out what you want to do in life. No woman will want to be with someone who isn't moving forward. I know you're still young and want to enjoy your youth, but you'll be 20 years old soon. When I was 20, I was already married and had a child. I worked full-time and went to college at night. You have it much easier than I did, and so do many others. It's important for you to think about what you want to do with your life. This choice will help you find the right partner. Look for someone who will support your goals and the life you want. Find someone who will be happy with how much money you make in your job. Stay away from girls who are high maintenance and only think of themselves. Look for someone with depth and strong values. Maybe it's time to take a step back and really learn about yourself. Then you can meet someone special and get to know her better. I did that with your grandma. We had a wonderful life together. We enjoyed many of the same activities like camping and fishing, and we worked together too. I found an amazing partner, and I believe you can too. Garrett wanted to argue with his grandfather about some things he said, but as he thought it over, he realized that his grandpa might have a point. Most of the girls he dated were friends of his sister, or daughters of his mom's friends. They all came from wealthy families. They were used to getting what they wanted when they went out. None of them cared about the things he liked. Maybe his grandpa was right about other things, too. After thinking for a bit, Garrett said, "I'll think about it, Grandpa. but you really do spend a lot of time just relaxing instead of working, and you seem to be doing just fine." His grandpa replied, "That's true, son, but I worked hard when I was young. Don't forget I'm retired now and living on my savings and investments." Garrett nodded. "Okay, but I remember when you were younger. You spent a lot of time having coffee at the cafe and fishing. Why is it okay for you to do that, but not for me? If I'm happy with my life, shouldn't I be able to live it too? A man should have the right to choose how he lives, my son. As long as he doesn't break the law or hurt anyone, I just want the best for you." After having a few more beers, the two men put out the campfire and crawled into their sleeping bags. The next morning, they got up and enjoyed a pot of coffee while watching the fog rise over the river. After breakfast, they took their beers and went fishing. When the fish stopped biting, they swam and relaxed, taking care of their dog while waiting for evening so they could fish again. After the long weekend, Garrett went back to his summer job at the construction company. He didn't date, but he spent some time with the girls and women who were around. The men he worked with mostly liked to hang out at bars. Some were friends' wives or girlfriends or friends of his own. He saw a clear change in how they acted and what they wanted compared to the girls he used to hang out with. They felt more like friends, but with some differences. They were fun to be around. Maybe he had been looking in the wrong places. One day in July, Garrett walked into the local arcade and found a man from the National Guard talking to a group of teens trying to get them to join. Garrett paid him no mind and headed straight for his favorite game. The game was about a soldier on a patrol in the jungle. The goal was to defeat the enemy soldiers without hurting unarmed civilians or your own team. After playing for a while, he noticed someone watching him. He turned, and the sergeant said, "You're really good at that game. Have you ever thought about joining the Guard and learning those skills for real? We can offer you a great deal right now. There's a bonus you can get for certain jobs if you meet the requirements. You also earn money while you learn for different careers. After your first training, you come back home and spend the next 6 to 8 years going to meetings 1 weekend a month and attending a 2-week camp every summer. Plus, you earn 4 days of pay for those weekend meetings and full pay and extra money for the 2 weeks in the summer. So, how much do I get paid and how long is the training? Well, your pay depends on a few things. Everyone starts as a private unless they have some education beyond high school. If you do, you can start as a private first class or PFC, which is E3. Did you finish high school? Do you have any college credits, son? Yes, I have 60 semester hours of college. I've been going to the local community college and just got an associate's degree in construction technology. I need to go to a 4-year college next semester if I want to keep moving forward. That's great. We can probably help you sign up as a PFC then. You could start earning good money right away. While you're in basic and advanced training, you might make about $1,700 a month. They'll also help with housing and meals while you live in the barracks and eat at the mess hall. If you stay there, you won't get extra for housing and meals. But if you live off the base, you would get extra money for that as well after you come home. You'd earn about $258 every weekend and $903 for 2 weeks in the summer. That's pretty nice pay for spending time with some great friends and helping your country." Something in the talk struck a chord with Garrett. Maybe he was just upset with his mother. He felt like he needed a break for a while. Whatever made him decide, he finally said, "You know, I think I'll do it. Gramps and I have talked about joining the Army before, and he thinks it's a good choice. That's great news. I have my papers in the car outside if you want to come with me. We can get started today. Once I set up your appointments for the tests and physical exam, I'll take you to them. If you pass, you'll get a date for when to start. After that, you'll join your unit for the monthly meetings, but you won't be sent out if they are needed elsewhere." Garrett took the ASVAB test, a way to see what jobs he could do in the military. This test helps match people to the right roles. He did very well on it. He was in great shape, so the physical exam went smoothly too. Once he got the results from both the physical and ASVAB tests, the recruiter was very excited. He called Garrett and said, "Garrett, you have a lot of options in the Guard. You did really well on the test, and I can help you get into almost any open position we have. I have spots for aircraft mechanics, vehicle mechanics, supply workers, and even medics. Just tell me what you want to do, and I can likely find you a job." "I just want to be a soldier. Are there any openings for infantry?" "Yes, there are. but I don't think that's the best choice for you. You could have a really good job. I actually need someone for a medic role in one of the infantry groups. What do you think? You could join an infantry unit and still get amazing training. This could help you find a job later as an EMT. It's pretty simple. After you complete the medical course at Fort Sam Houston, you might just need some extra training to work on a civilian ambulance, but it wouldn't be hard. I'm not so sure. I've never really thought about that kind of work. Just give it a try. If you don't like it, they might let you switch to something else. With a score like yours, this decision is easy. Plus, there's a little bonus when you sign up because they really need medics. So let's do this. Where should I sign? Garrett signed the forms and went to his basic training in the last week of August. He fit right in. He had spent many times in the woods since he was a kid, so he could move quietly and hide well. The animals he hunted never noticed him. He knew how to camp and find his way, and he shot like a pro. Maybe the only issue Garrett had in basic training was that it was too simple for him. He didn't make many friends when he told his fellow trainees, "You guys need to stop complaining. This is the easiest money I've ever made. Where else can you get paid to wander in the woods, shoot rifles, and have fun? Honestly, I thought the workouts would be tough, but this is just too easy." Garrett learned his skills well and graduated, though he didn't rank very high because he often took shortcuts whenever he could. He didn't mind doing the work, but he wondered why he should push himself more than necessary. After his basic training, he went directly to advanced training to become a medic. Again, he did well in school, but he didn't stand out much. His scores were average because he liked to take it easy. He excelled in hands-on training and in class, but he wasn't very good at taking initiative. He always needed someone to tell him what to do and when to do it. Once he was given a job, he worked hard and finished as quickly as he could. Of course, he worked fast, so he could relax afterward. After completing his training, Garrett returned home and started his new life as a part-time soldier. He returned just in time to enjoy the summer with his grandfather again. He even got his old job back at the construction company. Now, he felt secure. He had a good part-time job in the military and another part-time job in civilian life. He could hunt and fish almost whenever he wanted and had more money than ever before. Life was good. In fact, the saying, "It doesn't get better than this," felt perfect for Garrett on a very hot Wednesday evening in late August. Garrett walked into his home after work, tired, and was met by his mother. She said, "Garrett, your grandfather passed away this morning. You might need to plan his funeral." Garrett walked to the couch and dropped down onto it. He stared at his mother in shock, unsure of what to do or say. He felt empty. His chest felt tight, and it was hard to breathe. He tried to speak, but no words came out. As soon as he sat on the couch, his mother started yelling, "Garrett, get off my furniture. You know better than to sit here in your work clothes. Go upstairs and clean up. Dinner will be ready in 10 minutes, and we won't wait for you." Garrett felt anger building up inside him. It reminded him of how upset he felt when his mother told him about his grandfather's death. She didn't even call him at work to tell him. His face turned red and he almost jumped up. He wanted to shout at his mother for being so harsh, but she was quick to respond. "Don't you talk back to me. You know the rules in this house. After you get cleaned up and we eat, you need to call Barker's funeral home to make the arrangements." "Why didn't you call me at work, Mom?" he asked. "I could have handled it." "You didn't need the distraction," she replied. "You need that money to help with bills around here. I'll need at least $100 each week starting now, on top of the things you buy just to get by. Ever since that old man passed away, he was giving me that money for Beatrice. I'm sure that will stop now. I might have to find another way to get money from his estate or your trust funds soon." Just then, Beatrice walked into the room. She looked very pretty, and her makeup was perfect. She looked at her mom and brother and asked, "What are you doing in here, Mom? I need to get over to Rebecca's. We're going to the movies and I can't be late. Isn't dinner ready yet?" Garrett knew she didn't care about their grandfather any more than their mom did, but her cold attitude really annoyed him. He turned to Beatrice and said, "Why don't you just be quiet? Grandpa's gone and all you can think about is being late to hang out with your friends. You really are so selfish, aren't you?" Beatrice turned to face Garrett fully and shouted, "You jerk! Why do you care if I go out with my friends or not?" She continued, "Now that the selfish old man is gone, maybe we can get some of his money and live better." Garrett glanced at his mother, who remained quiet, so he turned back to Beatrice and said, "You're right. What you do is none of my business, and honestly, I don't care. I'm leaving." He hurried upstairs, leaving the two women looking surprised. Garrett quickly took a shower, then headed to his room. He packed most of his clothes into an old army bag and carried it downstairs. He placed the bag by the door and went back up to get his computer and some important papers. Just before he went out the door to put his things in his truck, he heard his mom and sister laughing in the kitchen, their silverware clinking on their plates. Garrett took the first load to his truck, carrying his clothes. When he went out the second time, he let the door slam behind him before getting into his truck. His mom was at the door looking very unhappy. She shouted, "Garrett, you know not to slam the doors. Come back here and close it, right?" "And where do you think you are going?" Garrett looked at her and replied, "I don't know where I'm going, but I can't stay here any longer." He got into his truck, started it up, and drove away while his mom watched him leave. Garrett headed to the small bar and grill where construction workers often went. When he walked in, he saw several people he worked with or recognized from earlier visits. Most of them expressed their sadness about his grandfather's passing. A few asked why he was there. Garrett replied, "I had to get out of the house. I couldn't take it anymore with Mom and Bea. They didn't even tell me about Gramps until I got home. Then, in the same breath, Mom asked for $100 a week for expenses on top of what I already give her. She said since he was gone, he wouldn't be sending her money for Bea, and now it was up to me to help out. She is even looking for ways to get some money from trust funds we have. I don't mind helping, really. I've been buying my own clothes and taking care of myself since I finished high school. I even helped pay for food, but she could have waited until after the funeral. On top of that, she said I had to handle all the plans, and she called him all sorts of bad names. He was there, and she was just as bad. All she wanted to do was eat so she and her friends could go out. When I left, they were in the dining room laughing and having fun while eating dinner. I just stopped in here for a burger before heading to the funeral home to take care of things." Kathy Wilson, the boss's daughter, came over and hugged him. Then she said, "Oh, Garrett, I'm so sorry. We all just heard about your grandfather. If there's anything I can do to help, just let me know. Come on over and sit with us while you eat." Garrett began to relax as he had his meal and listened to his friends chat. Kathy and a couple of her girlfriends sat off to the side, but they joined in the conversation now and then. Garrett found himself wishing his family was more like these co-workers, as he couldn't really call them friends yet. Still, he felt that some of them might become friends soon. After he finished his meal, Garrett pushed his chair back and stood up. Bill looked up and said, "Hey, where are you going so soon, Garrett? Are you tired of being with us already?" "No, Bill. I just have things I need to do before it gets too late. My mom wants me to help with arrangements for Gramps, and I need to find a place to stay for the night." Kathy looked up and asked, "What do you mean find a place to stay? I thought you still lived with your mom and sister." "Well, I guess I messed that up when I left tonight. I think I'll go to Gramps' place and stay there for a bit, at least until I figure something out or get told to leave," Garrett replied. Bill said, "It's okay to skip work for the rest of the week, right?" "Of course. Don't worry about it. If you need more time, just call me Sunday night or early Monday, and we can figure something out. Let us know when and where the services will be." They said goodbye to your love on Saturday at the local cemetery next to his wife. Garrett was surprised when Wilma showed up, but he wasn't surprised that Beatrice didn't come. After the service, Wilma approached Garrett and said, "I called Jerome's lawyer on Thursday to ask about his estate, but he wouldn't tell me anything." "Do you know what's happening with it?" she asked. "No, I haven't heard anything. And unlike you, I have had more important things to deal with." Garrett turned to leave, but just as he was getting into his truck, Wilma called out, "Hey, Garrett, where are you staying? I really need to know how to reach you if I need something." "Oh, by the way, I haven't received your payment yet for last week's food and rent," she added. "When will you give it to me?" Garrett paused and looked back at Wilma, feeling uneasy about what he was about to say. "I'm staying at Grandma's house right now. As for the money, I don't plan to send you any. I'm not living with you anymore, and I need all my money to cover my living costs and pay for college." "What?" "I mentioned that I need an extra $100 each week to make things work and to buy what Beatrice needs. I'm sorry, but that's the least I can take from you." Garrett just stared at her, then got into his old truck and drove away. He was shocked by her response. On Monday evening, Wilma was waiting for him at Grandma's house when he returned from work. She stepped out of her car and walked up to his truck. As soon as Garrett opened his door, she said, "I came for the $100 you owe me. We can't wait any longer for it." Before he could reply, she held up her hand and continued, "I know you're not living with me anymore, but you still live in my house. The rent is $125 a week, paid in advance." "You can pay monthly if that's easier," she added. "That's not fair. I told you I need all my money to get by," Garrett replied. "You need to find someone else to help you. This isn't your house. We don't even know who it belongs to right now. But as I see it, according to the rules about inheritance, it will never be yours to rent or sell. It should go to either me or Beatrice or maybe both of us. In any case, you won't be getting any rent from it. How about we let the courts figure it out? I'm really upset, Garrett. I need more money to live on. If you moved back home, it wouldn't hurt you to give us some help. We could do just fine with what we both earn. I know you make good money with your job in the Guard, and you still work part-time at that construction job. You could help us out a little, you know." "No way." "Sorry, Mom. That's not happening. I have my own bills to pay here, and I'm still paying for college. And let me tell you, that costs a lot. Are you planning to help with my college expenses?" Garrett shut and locked his truck, stepping around his angry mother. Garrett walked into his house and shut the door, making sure to lock it behind him. The following Friday, he got a phone call from Wilma. She said, "Garrett, you and Beatrice have a letter from Jerome's lawyer. They want both of you to come to the reading of the will next Wednesday at 10 a.m. at their office." "I haven't received my letter yet. I hope it comes soon because your letter and Beatrice's didn't say anything about the estate or how things will be shared," Garrett replied. "You opened my letter and read it?" he asked, surprised. "Of course I did. I'm your mother and I need to handle your business for you," Wilma said. "Well, it was addressed to me. You shouldn't open other people's mail." "I don't have it anymore. I hired a lawyer to help us so we don't get tricked. I gave the letters to him," she explained. That made Garrett angry. He quickly jumped into his truck and drove to the nearby post office. He got a post office box to keep his mail safe and changed his address. This way, Wilma couldn't open his mail anymore. Garrett arrived at the lawyer's office on the day and time set for reading the will. Wilma and Beatrice were already there with the lawyer they had chosen. Wilma glared at him as he walked in, and Beatrice acted as if he wasn't there, which was her usual response. They were then called into the conference room for the reading of the will. First, the lawyer checked everyone's identity and opened a folder full of papers. He explained that this meeting was to decide how to share the belongings of Jerome Mans, who had passed away. All debts needed to be paid from his estate before anything could be given to the remaining family, as stated in his will. After the final bills are paid and any other valid debts settled, the estate will be shared as Jerome wanted before he died. Jerome made some important arrangements for his property before he passed away. Beatrice Mans will get the house and the 20 acres of land around it, based on a survey included with the documents. He gave a file to Wilma and Garrett. Garrett Mans will get the rest of the farmland and the property at 3 Main Street, Stella, Missouri. This place used to be the Bank of Stella, and he will also receive everything inside that building. After paying all the bills, any leftover cash, bank accounts, and investments will be shared equally between Beatrice and Garrett. Since Jerome set up a transfer on death deed years ago, the house and land do not need to go through a legal process called probate. This means the property can go directly to his chosen heirs. However, the bank accounts and personal items will need to be processed through probate, but their overall value is not very high. The lawyer looked at the 3 people in the room and asked, "Do you have any questions?" Wilma, her face bright red, replied, "Yes, I have one. I didn't hear anything in that will about me. What do I get? Nothing at all? I'm scared." The lawyer said, "Ma'am, you are not related to Mr. Mans by blood, and he did not choose to include you in his will. So, you will not receive anything from his estate. As you heard, everything goes to your daughter and son." He continued, "The house and land your daughter inherited will be held in trust for her until she becomes a legal adult. Our office will manage that trust for her." "That's crazy," she shouted. "He can't do that. I won't allow it." The lawyer replied, "I'm sorry, ma'am, but he can, and he did. You have the right to fight the will in court, but I must warn you, It is likely to remain as it is." He then added, "If you contest it, your children may end up with even less because of the legal fees. Is that really what you want for them? We need all we can get to live." "Wait," Wilma said. "Are you saying the house belongs to Beatrice? What about renting? Can she rent it? And if she can, will you send us the rent money so we can use it to live?" "Yes, I think we can make that work. But since it would be her money, we need to make sure it is only used for her needs." "Well, that's okay. Garrett has been living in the house since his grandfather passed away. He has not given me any rent for the place. I ask that you take $125 a week from his inheritance and give it to me for rent." The lawyer looked surprised. He turned to Garrett and asked, "Is that true, Garrett? Did you move into the house and agree to pay rent?" "I moved into the house the night Grandpa died. I never agreed to pay rent. Mom wanted $100 a week for me to stay at home. I was already paying for most of the food and my own bills, so I thought that was too much. She and B were very selfish. I decided to leave since the house was empty and I had nowhere else to go. So I moved in there. I'm sorry, son, but you didn't have the right to do that. Your mother is correct. Since the house belongs to your sister, you need to either move out or pay rent. I will look into how much rent is fair and let you know." "That sounds unfair. I can't pay that much rent right now. I have to cover living costs and my college fees with my earnings. Wait, you say the old bank belongs to me? This is crazy. I'll just move into it. I think Grandpa mentioned there were some apartments upstairs before. I can stay in one of those empty apartments on the second floor. Would that work? I won't have to pay rent for that, right?" The attorney smiled and said, "Yes, that sounds fine. And no, you won't have to pay rent to yourself. But what about the money he owes for past rent? We really need that money. How do you expect us to get by if he doesn't pay? I can't manage on my salary alone. I will figure out the fair market rent and take that amount from his inheritance. I will then pay it to your daughter, Mrs. Mance, for how you will find money to live. I can't say I thought you had a full-time job. Well, I do have one, but it doesn't pay enough. I only earn about $48,000 a year, you know. I'm sorry you are struggling with that salary, but I find it hard to believe. You earn more than most people around here, and they seem to manage. You should be doing okay with that amount." The lawyer leaned back from the table a bit and said, "Unless there are more questions, that seems to finish today's topics." Everyone stood up and started to leave the room. Wilma and Beatrice were the first to go outside. The lawyer said, "Garrett, can you please stay for a few more minutes? I have some other things to talk to you about." After your mother and sister left, the lawyer signaled to the door and his assistant closed and locked it. He then turned back to Garrett and said, "I think you understand that what we talked about today is much less than what your grandfather had. I'm surprised your mother didn't notice and ask where the rest of the property went. I need to let you know that before he passed away, he gave all of his business assets to his longtime employees with a special legal document. This means the business and related property never became part of his estate. The same goes for the property that was given to you and your sister. I'm also surprised that your mother and sister didn't bring up the business in our talk, especially since your mother works there." The lawyer then took a letter out of his folder. He looked at the envelope for a moment and then handed the letter to Garrett. He said, "Your grandfather left this letter for you. Take your time to read it. After that, if you have any questions, we can talk about them before moving on to something else." Garrett opened the letter and read it. It said in part, "Garrett, you have brought me great joy. I know this might sound strange, but I love you very much. I have set up support for you to live well if you are willing to work hard for it. Maybe your biggest problem is that you take things too easy. I had hoped joining the Guard would change that. The military helps boys grow into men. I was so proud when you signed up, but it seems you only do just enough to get by. If that's your goal in life, that's fine. But if you want more, it's time to put in the effort, my boy. If you really try, there's no limit to what you can achieve with your smarts. You can stay here like I did when I got older, taking short tours with the Guard and still earn a good living. Or you can work hard and do really well. I hope you choose to work hard and succeed. You have what it takes to do it. I know your mother and sister can be very demanding, and I'm sorry you have to deal with that. I could legally leave your mother out of my will, but I chose not to. I felt I had a responsibility to leave something for your sister. So I gave her the house and a little land. She can live comfortably there if she can manage her spending. It could be a nice home for her and a future partner. But I worry she and your mother might sell the place and waste the money. Either way, I have done my part for her. Regarding your inheritance, I hope you keep the land and enjoy it. You can farm it like I did, or you can go fishing and camping there, just like we did for many years. I also left you the old bank building and the land it sits on. As you know, I haven't been in the bank since it closed. I can't really remember what is still inside the building. I do know there are some stock certificates in there that belong to you now. That's where I earned a big part of my money. It doesn't matter what else is in the bank because it is all yours now. After Dad died, I never went back to the bank. I did have one of the maintenance workers check the roof for leaks and to make sure the building was still in good shape from time to time. We had to take away the outside stairs to the apartments to keep them safe. After we did that, the building looked okay for its age, which is quite old. At the same time, we also removed the outside landing and the side and front decks. This was to stop kids from climbing up to the apartments. As far as I can tell, the building is strong and safe. I don't know what you plan to do with it, but it's yours to keep or sell. I believe some of the old furniture could sell for a decent amount if you decide to sell it. Remember this old man with kindness and happy memories. Focus on the good times we had together. I will do the same for you. Goodbye, son. After he finished reading the letter, Garrett leaned back in his chair and looked at the lawyer. When he saw Garrett settle back, the lawyer said, "Your grandfather left me some money to help you, Garrett. He thinks your mom will try to challenge the will if she doesn't agree with it. I will hold the money to help you with legal services until it is all used up or until I retire. After that, I will give you whatever is left. Your grandfather put the property in stock accounts, but there isn't much money left there now. Soon, you and your sister will get a notice about the ownership transfer of the property you will receive. I have already sent the death certificate to the necessary places and started the transfers for you and your sister. The only things that need to go through the court process are a few personal items and some bank accounts. You can take control of your building and land anytime. Now I need to go to my next appointment. If you have any questions or need more help, just give me a call. Please, Garrett. On your way out, see Stacy for your keys to the bank." That afternoon, Garrett went to his grandfather's old house to pack up his things. He decided to check the old bank, hoping to move into one of the apartments. As he walked into the building, he sneezed because it smelled musty from being closed for so long. Inside, he noticed that the desks and teller areas still had papers, calendars, and pens on them. It looked like someone had just left for the day and planned to come back the next morning. However, he found that there were no stairs inside to get to the upper floors. He stepped outside and spotted a door at the side of the building that led to the second and third floors, but there was no way to reach them. He remembered that years ago, his grandfather had hired a company to remove the outside stairs because kids were sneaking into the apartments and playing there. Now, he had to decide if he wanted to live in the bank itself or find a way to build stairs to access the apartments. The concrete bases for the stairs and balcony supports were still there. That was something, at least. For now, he would make do with the bank itself. His first task was to get power and water back in the building. From what he saw, he would need to rewire everything. The old wires were covered with cloth and were not safe at all. The building had never had city water, so that was another thing to fix. Also, when the bank was open, it used its own water supply. He guessed it was all dried up now, or the pipes and pump were broken. Anyway, city water was available, so there was no reason to fix the well. The next morning, Garrett woke up early. He usually liked to sleep in, but the hard floor of the bank made it hard to be comfortable. He quickly got dressed and headed for the door, planning to find something to eat. Maybe at the cafe next door, he was still feeling a bit sleepy and didn't notice when he walked out the front door of the bank onto the sidewalk. He stepped right in front of Kathy Wilson and her dad as they walked towards the cafe. He saw them out of the corner of his eye and tripped, almost falling as he tried to steer clear of them. Kathy reached out and grabbed him to help him stay upright. She asked, "Garrett, where did you come from? You seem to appear out of nowhere like you just walked out of the bank." "Yeah, I did," he replied. "Grandpa left the bank to me when he passed away. I didn't have anywhere to go, so I spent the night there. I guess that will be my home for a while. Bixby and Mom sort of kicked me out of Graham's house yesterday. She got it after he died and wanted most of my paycheck from the construction job as rent. So here I am. Come on with Dad and me, Kathy said. We're going to the cafe for breakfast. Sure, me too, he said. I'm not sure what to do about food and water. There's no power or water in the old bank. I need to fix the wires and pipes before I can get any electricity. That means I either have to eat out or make a sandwich. The problem is, I can't really afford to eat out. Bill looked up when he heard Garrett mention that there was no power or water. You can't live like that, he said. Let's check out the old bank after we eat. Maybe we can help you with that. After their meal, the three of them went to the bank. When Kathy walked through the door, she stopped and looked around. Wow, she whispered. This is really cool. It doesn't look anything like banks today. Kathy wandered around, picked up a few items, examined them, and then set them down. When she returned to Garrett and her dad, she said, Garrett, a lot of this stuff is really old. I bet you could sell it for a lot of money and use that to fix your water and power. What else is here? Garrett asked. I don't know, Kathy replied. What you see is all I've noticed. The vault is locked, and I don't know the key to open it. I haven't checked any of the drawers or desks either. I'm not sure what is inside them. While you and Dad look around to see what needs fixing, can I check some of the desks? Sure, go ahead. After Bill and Garrett took a quick look at the bank, Bill said the old building is still standing well, but we will need to remove all the old wires and pipes. They are in really bad shape. Are you sure you want to live here? Well, maybe not here, but this building does have apartments on the top 2 floors, but Grandpa had the stairs taken away years ago to stop the kids from getting into the apartments and climbing on them, which could be unsafe. I was hoping to live upstairs in one of those apartments. Bill stepped out of the building, saying, Let's get the ladder from my truck and see what's up there. I think we can check the 2nd floor and maybe even the 3rd if we use the ladder, Bill said. He looked at the doors and windows that were covered with boards. He put on his tool belt and climbed the ladder, holding a small pry bar. He examined the wooden boards covering the door, then carefully slid the pry bar under the edge. He worked around the wood, loosening it little by little. Once the bottom and part of the sides were free, he moved down the ladder a short way and lifted the boards over his head, then climbed back up under them. He steadied himself and continued to pry the wood off until it fell to the ground. Bill tested the doorknob and frowned. He looked down at Garrett and said, The door is locked. Do you happen to have the keys? Garrett replied, I'm not sure. I received a bunch of old keys from the lawyer. I needed to go inside and grab them. Garrett ran around the corner and to the back. The doors leading to the upstairs part of the old building were on the side facing the parking lot. He quickly returned with a big bunch of keys on an old metal ring. He looked up at Bill and said, Here, catch, just before tossing them up. Bill caught the keys on the 2nd throw and turned back to the door. He tried nearly all the keys until he found one that unlocked the door. As he tried to open the door, it looked like a tricky dance since it opened outward. Finally, he managed to get it open, climbed up, and then vanished inside. Garrett quickly climbed the ladder and followed Bill into the upstairs. Once Garrett got inside the building, he noticed they were in a small entryway. There were 2 doors off the entry. One person was at the back door, and another was at the front, looking for the keys to the front unit. Then, Garrett walked up next to him. When the latch clicked, Bill said, Finally, why does it always seem like the last key you try is the one that works? Well, at least the doors are unlocked. Bill pointed to the door and said, After you, motioning for Garrett to go into the front apartment. The 2 friends stepped into a dark and gloomy room. They could barely see anything because the windows were covered. Garrett went to one of the side windows and tried to open it. After some effort, with Bill helping out and using a pry bar carefully, they finally got the window to open. They worked on the plywood covering, and with a loud screech, it came loose and fell to the ground. Light flooded into the room, revealing a space that had a couch, an old chair, and a lamp. They walked into another room, which was the kitchen. There was an old stove and what seemed to be a gas refrigerator. In the kitchen, they found a wooden table and 4 wooden chairs, a small bathroom connected to the kitchen, and there was a door that led to a small bedroom. In the bedroom, there was an old bed and a chest of drawers with a mirror that didn't work well. Well, this isn't too bad, Bill said. Let's see how the other room looks. The two friends moved through the small hallway and entered the second apartment. Garrett and Bill opened a few windows and removed some wood to let in more light. Once the room brightened up, they saw it looked just like the first apartment. Garrett glanced around and said, "I think I can live here. With a bit of work, it should be fine. We need to fix the wiring and get some water up here, but I can manage with the old decorations for now. I'll need to build some stairs. I really don't want to climb a ladder every time I come home." Bill looked around for a moment and said, "Yeah, this place wouldn't be too bad if it was cleaned up and fixed properly. At least we're lucky in this town because there are no strict area rules or building codes. We only need to follow the national and state rules. I think we can help you if you want. We can get some materials we need from leftover stuff, if you're okay with that. But putting in a safe set of stairs will still cost a lot. I already thought about checking the dumpsters on the job sites for things I might need. We often throw away items that can still be used. I will still need to buy the plumbing and electrical supplies. I really don't want to deal with building stairs and a deck for the upper floor either. I'm wondering if we can put in a stairway inside right off the entry." Bill walked back into the apartments and took a look around. He said it seems the two-bedroom closets are right behind the entrance here. If the upstairs is the same, we can place the stairs across the building and remove one of the closets on each floor. That shouldn't be an issue for the second floor. I'm thinking about turning the whole floor into one apartment for myself. I'll make the front part a living area and add a bedroom and either a family room or an office in the back. Actually, I might just create 3 bedrooms back there. I believe there's enough space to keep the upstairs as 2 apartments. Maybe I can rent those out for some extra money. Well, Garrett, I think that could work. But it will be pretty expensive, even if we use leftover materials and second-hand items from the job sites. I'll help you, but I won't cut corners or ignore safety this time. We're lucky this town doesn't have strict rules about building or inspectors to worry about, but I still want to make sure we do it the right way if we decide to go ahead. Thank you for offering to help, but I can't really pay anyone. I do want to build a bigger deck outside, though, somewhere nice to sit. Maybe we can even wrap it around the front so we can see Main Street like before. But this isn't about money. You're my friend, and if I want to spend some of my free time helping you, I will. As for the deck, I think we can do it. It just depends on how much work it will take to put in the supports. Don't forget, it might cost some money. I think we should also try to keep the old wood and fittings in good shape. Before we start, we should check with the town. It's important to see if we can put the building on the Register of Historic Buildings. There are grants and help available for fixing things up. I think there are even some tax breaks we might find. If you decide to list the building, you will need to keep the historic look on the outside. This might make it hard to add a balcony out front. If the building gets on the registry, you have to keep the outside looking as original as you can. That sounds good. I like how the building looks, and I really like the idea of getting tax breaks and grants. But I don't know how to apply for those. Do you? A little? But Doris in the office is the best person to talk to about that. She can help you. For now, let's get some wiring set up for the bank and see about connecting you to city water. Then you'll have a place to stay while we finish the other work. It'll take some time because I'll be working part-time in the evenings. I won't work every evening or weekend either. I don't expect you to. I can handle most of the work by myself anyway. I'll definitely need help with the hard work and making sure the stairs and deck are built right. If it doesn't cost too much, I think I want the deck frame to be made of steel. They walked into the bank and saw Kathy sitting at a desk, looking at some old magazines. She looked up and said, "Garrett, I found lots of interesting things. Look at these pictures. I think this one is from the grand opening of the building. There's an article with it that looks like it was cut from the newspaper back then. The building looks just like it did, except the stairs and landing are gone. There used to be a balcony on the front of the second floor." "Did you say balcony?" "Let me see that picture, please," Garrett said, a little excited. "I remember Gramps mentioning that there used to be a balcony that looked over Main Street." Garrett took the article and pictures from Kathy, looked them over quickly, and said, "Check out this bill. There used to be a balcony, just like I mentioned when the building was built. Do you think that will help us?" "Yes, it definitely will, Garrett. There must have been some support in the front at one time. Let's take a closer look and see if we missed anything," Bill replied. "The width needs to stay the same as before, but at least we can have the front balcony. Do you want to keep it? It looks like it's only as wide as the sidewalk. I would say maybe 8 feet at most. The third floor didn't have a balcony, but there was a nice roof that covered the second floor balcony and the sidewalk below. For its time, this was really a fancy design. Kathy waited eagerly as the two men discussed the balcony. She didn't understand why it was such a big deal. Her curiosity about the drawers and the vault was much more important to her right now. She soon interrupted them, saying, "Garrett, I still want to see what's inside some of the desks in the vault. Some of the teller's drawers are locked too. Do you have the keys for them? What about the vault? It's locked too. Can you open it? It would be really neat to see inside a real bank vault." Garrett tossed her the keys and said, "Here are all the keys I have. Go ahead and take a look. I have some papers the lawyer gave me. They're over there on the big desk. If the vault code isn't in them, I don't know where it could be." Kathy took the keys from Garrett and went straight for the locked drawers and rooms. As she grabbed the keys, she said, "Cool, thanks." Garrett and Bill exchanged looks, smiled, and then shook their heads. Bill and Garrett went outside to get a closer look at the front of the building. Bill pointed and said, "Hey, Garrett, there are some odd spots on the blocks. I wonder if they fixed the anchors after they took down the balcony. It really looks like they might have. If that's true, it could make putting up a balcony much easier, and it would probably cost less too. It will also help when you apply for historic status. You're not changing the building, you're bringing it back to how it originally looked." The two men kept talking about the work and money needed to fix and remodel the building. Garrett decided to hire his boss's company to put in the support for the stairs, landing, and balcony. It needed to be done right to keep everyone safe, both those using the balcony and those walking underneath it. Back inside, Bill and Garrett looked at the details for a moment. Bill asked, "Have you thought about what you'll do with this floor? That strong walnut paneling and trim will look great if you can keep it and include it in whatever plans you have for the back. This space could be perfect for a small office." "No, I haven't even thought about how to use the building besides living upstairs," Garrett replied. "I never thought about fixing up the apartments for renting them out. I only used them for myself until you brought it up. I'm not sure if I want to deal with renting. After hearing about all the issues you have, like damage and late rent payments, I'm hesitant. But I could use the extra money, so maybe I will consider it. If you can find a good way to check your renters, that can help a lot. The laws seem to protect renters more than the people who own the places. You have to be careful with how you take care of the apartments because you could get into trouble. But it is possible to manage. Kathy and her mom handle my rentals and they seem to know what they're doing. We still get some late payments, but most of the damage comes from normal use. I haven't had to ask anyone to leave for over a year. If you decide to rent, you might want to get some advice from them. Or even better, since you don't have many apartments, maybe they can help manage yours. But that's all in the future. Right now, I need to make sure everything is in good shape first. What do you think we should do to fix this mess? I'm not sure if we should start with the water or the electricity. Maybe the water first? That way I can at least clean up and take care of some things. I think you're right about that. I don't have much planned for today. I can head home and grab some pipes and tools. If you want to try your hand at plumbing, you can start removing the old pipes while I'm gone. We can get some of the work done in here. Then next week you can contact the city about a meter and connect to the main lines. The outside walls of the old bank were made from thick limestone blocks, so most of the pipes and wires are inside the room instead of hidden in the walls. This wasn't great for looks, but it made it a lot easier for Garrett to take out the old wires and pipes. He carefully kept all the old pipes and wires for recycling later. The copper wire can be sold for a good price and will help cover some of the costs. Once he removed all the pipes and wires he could reach, he created wooden paths for the utilities. He made sure to put everything back inside the walls to keep them hidden. By the end of Sunday, he had finished the plumbing for the downstairs toilet in the bank and for the bathroom and kitchen in his upstairs apartment. Most of the plumbing was temporary because Garrett planned to remodel the bathrooms later and add modern fixtures. He wanted to keep the sinks and toilet in the same places so he wouldn't have to redo the plumbing too much. They even set up some temporary wiring to provide light and power for an air conditioner and to cook with. Now, all he needed to do was get in touch with the electric company and the city to start getting service. The next project was to build stairs so he could enter his apartments. That would be much easier than climbing a ladder. It took almost a month to work with the contractor, and it cost more than Garrett wanted to think about. He made sure the work was done well. To save money, he found used steel for the frame. He also worked hard to make the deck look as much like the picture Kathy had found as he could. Now he had a great spot to sit outside and watch everything go by, if he ever had the time. To his surprise, during the summer, some of the men he worked with came over to help with heavier tasks or things Garrett didn't know how to do. Even better, none of them wanted him to pay them for their help. He always made sure they had enough to eat and drink. Sometimes he even had a barbecue by the stream on his farm for his co-workers. They worked together to check all the plumbing and wiring in the building. By the time fall arrived, the only work left was to make everything look nice. Garrett decided to change the bathrooms and added new sinks and toilets to hide the pipes. Building the stairs from the second to third floor took nearly 2 weeks, but once it was done, it was much easier to reach the 2 apartments upstairs. To his surprise, Garrett found he could actually afford the work on the building. A lot of that was thanks to Kathy. She had the smart idea to sell items they found in the bank on eBay. It was surprising how much money the antiques made. People loved the old office supplies, calendars, and paper. She even set up a shop for him and handled the shipping, only keeping some of the extra money for her help. So far, they had not been able to open the locked vault. Garrett was too busy to worry about it, but Kathy was very curious about what was inside. She had reluctantly agreed with Garrett that they had more important things to focus on, but she still kept asking when he would get things finished. Finally, late in November, Garrett had both apartments on the 3rd floor ready to rent. The old bank building measured 30 by 72 feet, giving each floor a total space of 2,160 square feet. However, the shared entrance and stairs took up some space, so each apartment was about 1,000 square feet. Since they lived in a small town, he decided to charge $475 per month for each apartment. To his surprise, both of them were rented out within 2 weeks of being listed. This meant he would be earning $900 each month, which he could use for his living expenses or to make improvements to his apartment or the bank on the 1st floor. Kathy and her mother agreed to help him find tenants for $25 per apartment each month. None of the bills for services were part of the rent, so most of the rental money went directly to Garrett, except for a little that went to insurance and property taxes. After trying for a long time to find the right numbers for the safe, Garrett gave up and called a company to see if they could help open it. When the technician arrived, it felt like almost all of Garrett's friends were there to see it. Kathy was right behind the technician, jumping with excitement. After working for nearly 30 minutes, the technician turned the handle and there was a loud click. The locks opened and he slowly pulled the door wide while continuing to check the old safe. Kathy rushed inside the thick walls and started to look around. Bill and a few of his closest friends followed her in. Right inside the vault door was a big line of safety deposit boxes. Some were locked and some were open. Deeper inside, there was a thick steel grid that was also locked. Closed. Kathy pulled on the door but found it was locked, letting out a sound of frustration. She quickly ran past the men and headed back to the desk she had been using. She grabbed the keys and hurried back to the vault, trying each key until she found one that opened the folding door. She pushed the door open and stepped inside. Once inside, she paused and looked at the shelves. She was staring at them when Bill and Garrett stepped up next to her. There were several trays filled with money of all kinds, from small coins to real silver dollars. Further down the shelves were stacks of paper bills in different amounts: 1s, 2s, 5s, 10s, 20s, 50s, and 100s, although the bigger the bill, the smaller the stack. Kathy turned to Garrett and said, "Look at all this money. I bet there are thousands of dollars here. You could finish college and work at the bank without any trouble." Bill walked past Kathy and looked at the money. He picked up some of the bills and coins, then whistled softly before putting them back where they were. He turned to Garrett and said, "Kathy is more right than I thought. Even she understands, Garrett. This money is worth a lot more as collectibles than just what you see on the bills. Those coins are real silver, and some of the bills are special gold and silver notes. I didn't see any regular money here since the country stopped using gold. All those old notes were supposed to be returned and destroyed. You have a real treasure right there on that shelf. You need to make sure this vault stays locked, and don't say a word about what we found, or you'll be in serious trouble." Bill turned and started to guide Kathy out of the vault, reminding her to keep quiet about their discovery. As they walked through the room with the safe deposit boxes, she paused and said, "I wonder what's inside those locked boxes." Garrett turned away from the gate he was locking and replied, "I'm not sure, Kathy. I saw a list of the keys back in the vault. We can check them later." He started to walk past her, but then stopped to pick up a book on a small desk. He looked at the title, then opened the book and flipped through a few pages before he continued. "This book is about the safe deposit boxes. It seems the locked boxes are either for my family or the bank. If a box is empty, they keep it unlocked. So there might be something in the locked boxes." After they left the vault, a technician approached Garrett and said, "I just finished the maintenance on the vault. I can give you the combination now, or if you prefer, we can change it to something else." "That sounds good," Garrett answered. "Let's keep it as it is. Can you leave me steps on how to reset it later if I need to?" "Of course, sir. Just follow me, and I will show you everything you need to know, then I'll step aside." After talking for about 20 minutes and going through everything, the technician locked the door. He watched as Garrett unlocked it and locked it again. Then the technician left to help someone else, and Garrett walked back into the main part of the bank. There were several people around, and they started asking a lot of questions when he came in. The town's mayor, who thought very highly of himself, stood in front of Garrett and demanded to know what he found. "We all want to know what's in the vault. You did manage to get it open, right? I don't understand why we couldn't be in there to see it too." "Yes, we got it open. All we found was some old bank stuff and papers. I haven't had a chance to look at what's inside, but it doesn't seem like there's much that would interest anyone. Most of the safe deposit boxes are locked, and we haven't been able to open them yet. However, from a book I found, it looks like the locked boxes hold bank documents. All the papers show that everyone's personal documents and money were moved to different banks when our great-great-grandfather closed the doors and sold the deposits. So, what did you find in the papers? I'm the chair of the City Historical Society, and I need to know so we can record this in our local history books. I also need to have some information ready for the reporter when he arrives." Garrett glared at the small man, his teeth tight with anger, and said, "Do you really think I'm going to share what's inside? That's not your concern. This is private property, and what's in the vault is my business, not yours. We'll see about that. The vault holds important secrets about our town's past. You need to keep me, as the mayor and the head of the Historical Society, updated on this. Now please let me through." The mayor tried to push Garrett aside and signaled to one of his friends to help. Garrett moved back a little when the mayor shoved him. Then he planted his feet and stood firmly in front of the loud man. Even though Garrett was young, he was taller and stronger than the mayor. This time, when the mayor tried to push by him, he just bounced back. The mayor shouted again, "Step aside, young man, or there will be trouble." Garrett blocked the entrance to the back of the bank again. He said, "Kathy, can you please call the sheriff's office for help?" The small town didn't have its own police, but depended on the county sheriff for support. "Tell them I am having trouble with a break-in, and someone might get hurt." When he heard Kathy talking to the dispatcher, the mayor stopped trying to push past Garrett. As he was leaving the building, he shouted again, "You haven't heard the last of this, young man. You can either give me the information from that vault willingly, or I will make you hand it over. It's your choice." A sheriff's vehicle was nearby, so a deputy arrived in about 10 minutes. He walked into the bank and asked what was wrong. Garrett talked to him and explained the situation. With the mayor gone, there was nothing the deputy could do to help. He agreed to find the mayor and tell him that unless he could show proof that either the city or he had papers or money in the vault, he had no legal right to get into it. After the excitement faded, Garrett called his lawyer and talked about the problem. His lawyer told him there was nothing that could be done unless the mayor tried something illegal to reach the bank, like breaking in or using force. At the end of the month, when the rest of his bills arrived, Garrett noticed he did not get a bill from the town for water and sewer services. He paid all the bills he received at the end of the month and didn't even think about it. He only discovered he hadn't received the city bill when he found a letter on his door saying his service was cut off for not paying. Sure enough, when he tried to get some water, there was none. Garrett asked his tenants, and they both said they got their bills and paid them. They still had water service. He went to the city offices and found out that the bills had been sent, but he had not paid his. So the cutoff was correct. The city clerk who was also the mayor's wife, smiled and said that if he paid his bill along with the late fee and the reconnect charge, they could turn his water back on in a couple of days. The total would be $21.64 for the water, $1.10 for the late fee, and $1.75 to reconnect the service. What? That's not fair. I told you I didn't get the bill. I can pay the late fee, but the reconnect fee is not right. If you sent me a disconnect notice, then I should have received the bill too. Well, I'm sorry. Do you want to reconnect or not? Yes, let me write you a check. Oh, I'm sorry, sir. Since you are behind on your bills, we can only accept cash. I can't take your check. That's not fair. You accept checks from others? Yes, but those people are up to date with their payments. If you bring your bills up to date and work with the city, I'm sure you can start paying by check like everyone else soon. What do you mean, work with the city? This is the first time we've had any issues. You're treating me like I did something wrong. Well, now you see how that feels, don't you? If you follow the rules and become, let's say, more understanding and helpful, maybe these small issues could just disappear. Suddenly, Garrett had a realization. This was all the mayor's plan. He glared at the clerk, turned, and walked out, slamming the door behind him. Once he got home, he called his lawyer. Sadly, he learned he had no choice but to pay the amount they wanted. The lawyer said that if a company has a rule about stopping service for unpaid bills, and most utility companies do, then they are following the right steps. This assumes that the rule was shared with you at some point. Most utility companies include a note on the service application about the penalties for unpaid or late bills. You should check your contract, but I bet it has that information somewhere. From now on, I recommend marking your calendar and going to pay your bill at the city office before it's late until this situation settles down. But if you can show that they are bothering you and didn't send the bill, you might be able to get the fee for reconnecting your service waived. The next day, around mid-morning, a sheriff's patrol car arrived at the work site where Garrett was busy working. The deputy asked for Garrett and was shown where he was. When he found him, he checked his identity and said, "You have been accused of making threats against the city clerk in her office yesterday. Mr. Mans, luckily for you, they don't have any proof or witnesses, so we can't arrest you. But I need to let you know that this report is in our files. If you are accused of something similar again, you might be arrested next time. Do you understand what I'm saying?" "Yes, I do, but you know this is all nonsense." "Did you get the full story about the issue with the mayor? Or did you just believe him and his wife? What do you mean?" "We have a complaint claiming that you went to the city office and yelled for them to turn the utilities back on for your building after they had to cut off the service because you didn't pay your bill. You allegedly made several threats and then left the building in a rage, slamming the door hard enough to damage it. You got into your truck and left quickly, making the tires spin and throwing rocks and gravel against the building. This caused some damage to the paint, and now the city is preparing a bill for the repairs." Garrett started laughing when the deputy informed him about the damage from his truck. The deputy looked at him, upset, and said, "I assure you this is not funny, Mr. Mans. You could have hurt someone with that." Eventually, Garrett stopped laughing and explained, "I'm sorry, deputy, but I find it really amusing that you think I spun my tires when I live so close to the city offices. My truck has been in the garage for a whole week." He added, "If you want to check, you can ask the Mason Ford dealership. Anyone in town can confirm it, except maybe the mayor and his friends. I've been walking or riding my bike for the last few days because my truck is being fixed. I really think this is happening because I didn't let the mayor into my building. He wanted to look through my personal papers and the safe in the old bank. In front of others, he warned me that I would pay for not letting him in. We even had to call your office because he tried to enter the building without permission. When the deputy heard about the problems with the mayor and my truck, he looked thoughtful. Then he said that if what I was saying was true, the mayor might have reported something false. I need to take your statement, and we will ask a detective to look into this. I strongly suggest you keep away from the mayor and city workers until we sort this out." After the deputy left, Garrett called his lawyer to tell him about the talk. The lawyer, Mr. Douglas, said, "I think you should listen to the deputy and keep some space. When you are around the city office and the workers, I recommend bringing a tape recorder. This way, they can't make false claims against you anymore. It's also smart to have someone else with you as a witness. And remember to always get written receipts for any cash you give." That evening, on his way home from work, Garrett was being driven by Bill, who was helping him until his truck was fixed. "Let's stop at a local electronics store so I can grab a tape recorder that fits in my pocket," Garrett said. It turned out to be a good choice. As he reached the stairs to his apartment, the mayor blocked his path. The mayor stood in front of Garrett and growled, "Are you ready to work with me now, young man? Or do you need more persuasion?" Garrett felt uneasy but knew he had to stay calm. When Garrett saw the mayor, he turned on the tape recorder. He tried to stay calm and asked, "What do you mean, Mr. Mayor? What do you want me to cooperate on? And why are you here on my property bothering me?" The mayor replied, "You know why I'm here. I told you that if you didn't let me see the documents you found in the bank, there would be problems." Garrett stayed firm. "This is just the beginning. Look at what this has already cost you. Over $100 for water in just 1 month. If you keep ignoring me, you could end up in jail and lose everything. Just a few broken windows and you could face serious charges. So when can I see those documents in the bank?" The mayor replied, "How about never? I told you those papers are family and business documents, and you have no right to see them. That's my final answer. Now leave my property or I will call the sheriff and report you for trespassing." "Okay, listen. You let me know when you're ready to work together. What happens to you is your responsibility. I've given you a warning." The mayor stormed off in anger, and Garrett slowly walked up the stairs to his home. After he had dinner, he started to think about what the mayor had said. He decided to walk around town to see if he could find anything useful. He called a couple of friends to tell them about the argument he had. The next morning, when he arrived at the work site, Garrett heard one of his friends calling him. "Hey, Garrett, come over here for a second. I have something to show you." When Garrett reached his friend, he pulled out his phone and played a short video clip he had taken that morning. "I was driving past the back door of the city office," he explained. "You know, I live just down the block, and I saw the mayor talking to the meter reader behind the offices." The mayor lifted his head, and the meter reader hit him twice on the face. I caught a glimpse of the second hit when the mayor fell down and crashed into the door. He broke the glass, and it seemed like he got hurt a bit. "I guess you're not the only one angry with the mayor now." Garrett laughed and said, "Good. Maybe now he'll leave me alone." About an hour later, the same police officer who had talked to Garrett before drove up to him. This time, he pulled out his handcuffs and said, "Garrett Mance, you are under arrest for hurting someone and for damaging public property. Please turn around and put your hands behind your back so I can put these cuffs on you, sir." After he was handcuffed, Garrett asked, "What is going on? I didn't touch anyone or break anything. Is this because of the talk I had with the city clerk a few days ago? I thought we sorted that out." "I don't know anything about a talk with the city clerk," the officer replied. "You are being arrested today because this morning around 7:30 a.m., you reportedly had a disagreement with Mayor Parker and got into a fight with him behind the city offices. He filed a complaint. You have the right to stay silent." As the deputy was leaving, Garrett shouted to his friend, "Hey, Darren, please send that picture to my phone and to Mr. Oliver," Douglas said quietly. "Are you my lawyer? I think I might need one." When Garrett and the deputy got to the county office to book him, his lawyer, Mr. Douglas, was already there. After filling out the required papers, Garrett was allowed to talk to Mr. Douglas. The lawyer said, "Well, it seems this situation is going to get worse. Did you really fight with the mayor this morning? Is there any truth to this claim?" "No way. This is all nonsense, a total lie. When I got home last night, the mayor was there waiting for me and tried again to make me let him into the vault. I'm starting to wonder why he is so determined. He really wants to see what's in the vault. What is his true reason? It can't just be because he thinks there's something interesting for the historical society inside. That doesn't make any sense to me. If he had just asked nicely, we would have let him and the society look at some of the old documents and calendars. After I said no again, I told him to leave the property. As he was walking away, he said to let him know when I was ready to help him and that whatever happens is on me. I'm really glad I recorded our talk like you told me to. You can hear it on tape. That's good. But where is the recording? Oh no, I think the sheriff has it. I had the recorder with me when they arrested me today. I even recorded some of the chat with the deputy. Well, I guess I got most of it today because it was still running when they put the cuffs on me. Oh, and when they called you from my work site, Did they talk about the pictures Darren took this morning behind the city hall? I wonder if that guy is up to no good. Yeah, that must be it. What Darren told me when he came by City Hall on his way to work. He saw the meter reader and the mayor talking in the alley. Then the meter reader hit the mayor a few times and pushed him against the door. The glass broke and it looked like the mayor was in trouble. I bet that guy was hurt this morning. Instead of telling the truth that the meter reader did it, he blamed me. Darren was supposed to tell you about the video and send it to you. I hope that clears my name. Mr. Douglas grinned like a shark when he heard that. He got up and said, I think I have enough for now. I need to get your recording before it disappears, gets damaged, or is erased. And I need to find that witness from the fight this morning. You might be able to leave after the first hearing, but if things go the way I think, they will let you go. I wouldn't be surprised if your mayor ends up in trouble instead of you. The first hearing will probably be tomorrow or Thursday at the latest. The rest of the day and the whole night felt like forever to Garrett. He sat there, feeling scared that he might have to stay in jail for a while, and angry at the mayor for putting him in this situation. He just couldn't understand why this was happening. Sure, he had said no when the mayor wanted to go into the vault and check the papers inside, but why was the mayor so angry and vengeful about it? If the mayor had asked nicely and waited a few days for Garrett to look at the documents, he would have let him see them. After all, the mayor had a good reason for wanting to look at them. Some of the papers might help people learn more about the town's past. But Garrett did not want to let anyone see them freely, especially before he understood what was in them. The next morning, Garrett was taken to the courthouse for his first hearing. He felt ashamed to walk in his bright orange jumpsuit, with chains on his legs and handcuffs on his wrists. There were 3 other prisoners with him, and they attracted a lot of attention as they walked from the van to the courthouse for their hearings. Garrett was glad that his case was first. When he entered the courtroom, it felt like everyone he knew was watching him. Bill, Kathy, Darren, and a few people he worked with were all there as he walked quietly down the aisle to his seat. The mayor was there too. When he saw Garrett, he smiled big and winked at him. Garrett had some ugly bruises on his face and arm. His head was wrapped in bandages, likely from when he fell into the door and broke the glass. After sitting in the noisy courtroom for a few awkward minutes, he noticed the bailiff stand up and say, "Everyone, please stand for the Honorable Judge Judy McFarland." When the judge came in and sat down, she told everyone to take their seats. Once everyone was seated, she hit her gavel and opened the session. Then she called the first case. She read the charges against Garrett and explained that this was a preliminary hearing to decide if there was enough evidence for a trial on the alleged offenses. The prosecutor stood up first to present his case. He told the judge and everyone in the courtroom how dangerous and unreasonable he thought Garrett was. He claimed he had people who saw what happened and proof that Garrett hurt the mayor of Stella on that day. He also said Garrett had a history of being threatening. He told the court about Garrett's supposed threats from the day he tried to get his water turned back on. He even described how rocks and gravel were thrown at City Hall when Garrett drove away in anger that day. After the prosecutor finished, Mr. Douglas stood up to challenge what was said. He said, "Your Honor, my client, Mr. Garrett Mans, says he is not guilty of these charges. I have proof that shows my client did not do any of these things. If it's okay with the court, I would like to go through these claims one by one. First, about the supposed threats made at City Hall to the city clerk. There are no witnesses or proof of these threats. My client says he didn't do anything wrong. The wife of the mayor, who is also the city clerk, has a different story. But here's what really happened. On the day she said my client spun his tires and damaged the City Hall, he was actually walking. His truck was at the garage getting fixed, and it had been there for a whole week. I have proof of this, which I want to show as evidence number 1. Also, my client was not near City Hall last Tuesday morning. This is when she claims he hurt the mayor and pushed him against the door, breaking the glass. I have people who witnessed my client. They say he was with his supervisor on the way to a job site for work. Since his truck was still in the garage, he was sharing rides with co-workers to get to the job. Mr. Douglas then spoke up. Your Honor, I have a video from that morning. It clearly shows that it was not Mr. Mans who hurt the mayor, but it was actually Clarence Jordan, the city meter reader, who hit the mayor in the face and pushed him into the door. I don't understand why the mayor decided to blame my client for this injury. It's clear he didn't do what they say he did. People in the courtroom started whispering to each other after hearing this surprising news. The judge hit her gavel on the table 3 times and said, "Be quiet. If you don't, I'll have to clear the room." When Mr. Douglas skillfully argued against the prosecutor's case, the prosecutor looked very uncomfortable. At the same time, Mayor Parker jumped up and hurried to the front, where the audience sat apart from the lawyers and others involved in the hearing. He ran toward Garrett and shouted, "You jerk! I won't let you get away with treating me poorly like your family did to my great-grandfather. I know you have proof in that bank that can clear his name. Your family took his farm and got him sent to prison for robbery and even murder. You can help him, and then you'll have to give back what you took from us." As the mayor approached Garrett, he tried to hit him. Garrett lifted his hands, still in cuffs, to stop the hit. He saw 2 guards take hold of Mayor Parker. Once they had him under control, the judge ordered, "Arrest that man for disrespecting the court, attacking someone, and lying to us. After I look over the proof and what people have said, I might find more charges to add." The judge then looked at Garrett, and Mr. Douglas hit the gavel down hard. She announced, "I see no reason to keep Mr. Mann in court for these charges. The case is closed." It was afternoon before Garrett was let go from jail and could head home. He felt worn out, both in his mind and body, from everything he had been through. At least now, some of the mayor's actions began to make a little more sense. Well, not really, but he understood what had caused the mayor's anger. If only he could remember the name of the bank robber who tried to rob the bank and harmed his great-great-grandfather. But it slipped his mind. When Garrett got home, his friends already knew he was back. A few of them were waiting for him, and they cheered when he stepped out of the county car that brought him home. A little party started right by his building. To his surprise, he found himself relaxing as some of the worry and anger he felt faded away. He enjoyed some cold drinks and snacks that they had ordered from the cafe just down the street. Just before 3 p.m., the garage called to say that his truck was ready to come home. He and Kathy drove the 20 miles to town to pick it up, even though they probably had a bit too much to drink. When they got back to his house, the small parking lot was full of people having a good time. Some of them didn't even notice that Garrett was gone. Garrett couldn't remember what time he finally made it up the stairs to his apartment and collapsed into his bed. He recalled telling some co-workers that he would take the rest of the week off before going back to work. Work. Funny enough, he was starting to like it more and more. He enjoyed using his hands and seeing how buildings changed through his hard work. He even found satisfaction in the tougher jobs involved in fixing and restoring some old homes they worked on. He felt especially proud of his work on the apartments in his old neighborhood. His apartment was much bigger than the ones he fixed up for renting. The rental places he worked on were nice, much better than most of the rentals in his small town. Now, it was time for him to start fixing up his own place, but he wasn't sure what changes he wanted to make. The morning after he got out of jail, Garrett got out of bed. Well, it wasn't too early, actually. It was almost noon. He made himself a pot of coffee and sat on his covered balcony that looked out at the main street of his town while he enjoyed the hot drink. He decided to load up his old truck and head to his camping spots by the stream on his farm. He needed some peace and quiet to help him clear his mind before going back to his regular life. After finishing his coffee, Garrett packed some food for his 3-day trip and loaded everything into his truck. He usually kept his fishing gear and tools in the truck, so he was all set, just like always. He wished there was a shop in town where he could get some food and buy a drink, but there wasn't one. He took a small detour to pick up the things he wanted but didn't have at home. Then he hurried to his campsite. When he reached his favorite spot, Garrett didn't waste any time. He started to put up his tent made from some plastic tarps, then got the fire ready for later. He opened a drink and grabbed his chair, then sat back and listened to the sounds he loved. He watched the stream flow by and saw an occasional fish jump in the deep pool next to his camp. In the distance, he could hear the sound of an old baler and tractor as a neighbor worked on a small field of alfalfa hay. Sometimes he heard a cow moo or a rooster crow. Garrett felt his body relax as he enjoyed the peaceful country sounds around him. As the sun began to set, Garrett stood up and took his fishing pole from his truck. He looked around and caught a few grasshoppers and some grub worms. Then, he walked to the river to catch his dinner and breakfast. He found that the fish liked the worms more than the grasshoppers. In just 30 minutes, he caught 2 nice crappie and decided it was time to stop fishing. One of the fish he kept for the morning, and he quickly cleaned the other one to cook for dinner. Before too long, Garrett made a meal of fried crappie, fried potatoes with onions, and a small can of pork and beans. After eating, he cleaned up and laid out his sleeping bag. He relaxed on it with his hands behind his head, listening to the sounds of the evening. The wildlife made many different sounds, from chirps to croaks, as they moved around in the dark. He really enjoyed listening to the sound of fish jumping and the calls of frogs as night came and covered the land in a calming darkness, a quietness that was not found in the cities or even in his small town. The next morning, Garrett woke up with the sun. He quickly made his coffee. While the coffee brewed, he jumped into the cool water for a nice swim to wash away the sticky feeling of sweat from the hot night before. After his swim, Garrett didn't put on any clothes. He grabbed his first cup of coffee and sat by the stream to drink it. He relaxed as he watched the fog rise from the water and shine softly in the morning light. Birds flew around, and now and then a fish leaped in the gently flowing water. When the sun was fully up, Garrett finished his coffee and was ready to make breakfast. He cooked some bacon, an egg, and a mix of potatoes and onions for his first meal. He decided to save the fish for later. After he ate and cleaned the dishes, Garrett put on his old shorts, grabbed his fishing gear, and walked down to the stream instead of fishing by his campsite. He unlocked the chain that tied his small boat to a tree and pulled it into the water. Then, he went to a small building, unlocked it, and took out a small motor and a gallon of gas. After fixing the motor to the boat, he went back to grab a cushion for the seat and 2 oars just in case. He also took his cooler, which was packed with food and drinks for the day. Garrett started the motor and slowly made his way upstream. He leaned back in his seat as the calmness of the river washed over him. Even the soft sound of the boat motor didn't really bother him. He took his time moving upstream, passing by lovely old trees and sometimes seeing a cow or a calf. Most of the way, he was in the shade from the big tree branches that leaned over the water. Finally, after about 2 miles from where he started, Garrett turned off the engine and let the boat glide to a stop in a deep part of the stream. As the morning quiet surrounded him, Garrett let the boat drift back downstream with the gentle current. Instead of starting to fish right away, he opened his cooler and took out a can of soda. He cracked it open and leaned back in his seat. After sipping the soda, he stretched his legs and relaxed as the edges of the stream slowly passed by, enjoying each moment. The boat gently touched the shallow water near the bank under a very old oak tree. Garrett decided to let the boat stay there while he finished his beer. Then, he got his fishing rod ready for his first cast of the day. When he grew tired of fishing in one spot, he used the oars to push the boat back into the current and let it drift slowly. As the boat moved, he kept fishing until it grounded again. At that point, he would either push off again or just sit and fish for a while. Sometimes he would take a break from fishing to enjoy another beer or have a sandwich and some chips. He lost track of time completely. In fact, he didn't even bring a watch with him. It was late afternoon when Garrett finally floated into view of his campsite. He had caught his limit of crappie, so he decided it was time to stop fishing for the day. He parked his boat on the gravel by his campsite and began moving his things up to the tent. As Garrett made his first trip up the bank, he noticed a familiar face in his chair, sipping a beer. Just then, Kathy got up and said, "Oh, Garrett, you really worried me. Why didn't you let me know you were coming here today? When you didn't answer your phone, I got scared. I thought you might have had too much to drink last night and hurt yourself. I drove all the way to your place to check on you, and when you weren't there, I decided to come out here to see if you were okay." "How are you doing?" she asked. "I'm fine, Kathy. Just felt really bad yesterday morning. I didn't even get out of bed until almost noon. What time did the party finish anyway?" "I'm not sure," she answered. "I woke up in my truck around 4:30 and everyone else was gone, so I drove home. I haven't had a drink like that in a couple of years." "Yeah, me too. I'm really glad the police didn't show up. Who brought all the drinks and snacks anyway? I know a few of the guys. They weren't old enough to drink, and we could have gotten in trouble for that. I'm just thankful the mayor wasn't there to call the cops on us. Oh, there's something else I wanted to share with you. I heard on the radio this morning that the mayor got taken from the jail to the hospital. He said something to another inmate and got hurt pretty badly. Garrett laughed and said, "Well, at least this time they can't blame me." I guess it couldn't have happened to a nicer guy. They didn't say how serious it was, just that he went to the hospital after the fight. "Before I left town this morning, a bunch of reporters were asking around, looking for you and bothering everyone. They wanted to know what we thought about what happened. I just brushed them off after I said I didn't know where you were while they were talking." Kathy helped Garrett take his things back to the storage unit and tie his boat up to the tree, keeping it safe from the floods. Then they started cleaning the fish to get ready to cook them. After cleaning the fish, Garrett washed his hands and took a beer from the cooler. He tossed one to Kathy and grabbed one for himself, then sat in his chair to watch the water flow by again. Kathy pulled a chair next to him, and they enjoyed their drinks together. They had a chat. After some small talk, Kathy looked at Garrett and asked, "So, what now? Do you have a place to live? What are your plans from here? Are you going to finish fixing up your apartment? And what about the first floor? You really need to do something about the old money and things in the vault. Those old bills and coins are really valuable," she added. "I think we still need to look at everything in the safety deposit boxes. I know it. I plan to make my apartment nicer soon, but right now, I don't have the money for that, and I want to do it carefully. I want a nice place, but one that feels cozy too. Maybe I should find someone who knows about old money and see if a collector might be interested. Garrett, I'm sure someone would want it. It's just about figuring out how to sell it and get the best price. You might need to call some auction houses in a big city that manage things like that. You could also reach out to some larger dealers to see what they suggest for selling it. Yeah, you're probably right. I think I'll go back early on Sunday and start checking the boxes. Then, next week, I'll look for someone who can tell me about the bills and coins. Can I help with the boxes, Garrett? I would really like to see what's inside them. While you're working, I could check online to see if there's anyone who can help us with the money. I don't mind if you're there when I open the boxes. It would really help if you could find someone who knows about the money." "Sounds good. Now how about I make us some dinner before we drink too much?" Kathy and Garrett had a nice dinner together. She wouldn't let him help with cooking or cleaning, so he just sat and talked with her while she worked. As they chatted, they kept drinking and had some with their food. After dinner, Kathy was a bit wobbly, and so was Garrett. They were at that happy stage where everything seemed funny, laughing at silly things. Kathy almost lost her balance while trying to sit next to Garrett. She caught herself, looked around, and said, "I don't think I can drive home right now. Garrett, can I stay here tonight?" "Sorry, but I can't help with that." Kathy was not only beautiful on the outside, but her beauty also shone from within. The next morning, Garrett woke up to find himself lying close to Kathy and suddenly realized how cozy they were. He gently tried to move his hand away and shift back as he planned to get up from the bed. Slowly, Kathy turned onto her back and smiled at him. "Where are you sneaking off to so quietly?" she asked. "It's like you're trying to escape from something." Garrett replied, "I didn't want to wake you. I thought I'd make some coffee. Then when you're ready to get up, it will be waiting." Kathy raised an eyebrow. "Oh, come on, you look guilty, like you did something wrong." Garrett stammered, "I didn't mean for it to happen. I just woke up and found us here. I'm really sorry." Surprisingly, Kathy laughed and said, "It's all good. I'm the one who climbed into your bed. You're not the first man who's made an advance, and you're much better than others I've met." "Stop looking so guilty and let's do something fun," Kathy said. When she saw the surprise on Garrett's face, she sat up and added, "Garrett, not all women are like your mom and sister. Don't get me wrong. None of us like being touched in ways we don't want, or getting attention we didn't ask for. But we both know you were half asleep when you got cozy. You were, right?" "Yes, I would never take advantage of you," Garrett replied, feeling a bit embarrassed. Kathy smiled and got out of bed. She walked toward the trees, saying, "Why don't you make some coffee while I enjoy the fresh air? Then we can find something better to talk about." Garrett admired Kathy as she moved gracefully across the clearing and disappeared into the woods. After they had their coffee and a light breakfast, they cleaned up. The day was already warm, so Garrett walked into the stream until the cool water reached his neck, feeling relaxed. Kathy watched him for a moment. Then she took off her shorts and joined him, wearing just her shirt and underwear. Garrett stared at her in surprise as she walked toward him, looking into his eyes. "What?" she asked. Am I not allowed to cool off too? Well, yeah, but you're not wearing a swimsuit, he replied. And you are? She shot back. No way! I trust you to be a gentleman, Garrett, she said. Can we just forget about this and leave soon? I really want to explore the vault before it gets too late. Yeah, I guess so, he said. After they floated in the water a little longer, Garrett reluctantly swam to the shore. He dried off a bit and took his wet towel back to the bank where he had left it for Kathy. He stood there for a moment, watching her, but then she said, Garrett, you've seen everything I want you to. Please go back to camp until I'm ready. Feeling a bit sad, Garrett walked back to camp and started packing up the things he would take home. He heard Kathy come out of the water, and he found himself unable to look away. He turned to see her. She had already wrapped the towel around herself, keeping everything covered. In her other hand, she held her shorts. Kathy shook her finger at him and said, Just keep working. She then walked over to the tent, picked up her light long-sleeve shirt, and quickly disappeared behind a storage building. Kathy came back wearing her shirt tied at the waist and her dry shorts. The two friends finished packing up their things. Kathy followed Garrett as they drove back to town and stopped at his house. They spent a few minutes carrying things upstairs and putting them away. After that, they both enjoyed a tall glass of iced tea before heading downstairs to the back. Kathy waited eagerly as Garrett opened the vault and quickly followed him inside. She could hardly contain her excitement as he opened the steel folding door. He walked over to the key rack and took down the keys for the first locked box, along with the bank's key for the second box. Garrett then went to the safe deposit boxes and put the keys into the right slots for the first box he wanted to open. He felt someone move close to him on his left side. It was Kathy, wanting to see as he unlocked the box and took it out of the vault. Well, open it, she urged. Garrett sighed and tried to find a way to lift the lid and look inside. Kathy leaned in between him and the box to see what was there. Inside, the box had a stack of papers, but they couldn't tell what they were without taking them out. Finally, Garrett pushed her gently away and said, Come on, Kathy, give me some space. Let's take this box to a table in the main part of the bank and look through it there. After they sat down, Garrett took the papers out of the box and handed them to Kathy. She spread them out on the table and picked up the first paper. She opened it and began to read. Garrett took the next paper and did the same. They took turns reading the papers until they had looked at every single one. After a while, Kathy slumped in her chair, looking disappointed. Well, that wasn't very exciting, she said. It was just a bunch of old pages. Why do you think they kept these? She asked. I thought it would be something interesting. Garrett replied, It might not seem exciting now, but these were important back then. Look closely. These are records for loans people took from the bank. They show how much was borrowed and when each payment was made. They probably had to keep these old records just in case someone needed to see them later. Kathy looked through the pages and noticed that each loan had been paid off completely. So these are like old history books, she said. Interesting in their own way. You notice that each paper shows when the payment is due, when it was paid, and any late fees that might have been added. There are columns for the main amount owed, the interest, and what is left to pay. Did you notice any from the old businesses that used to be in town? I saw one from the old feed store where they added a part to the building and another for grain purchases one year, using the grain as a guarantee. I bet the Historical Society would really like to have some of those papers. Come on, Garrett, let's find another one and see what's inside. No, wait, Kath. Let's be organized. I want to find some paper and make a list of what's in each box so I can find something later if I need to. Didn't you say some of the books in the vault had information about what's inside the boxes? Yes, sort of. One of the books showed who rented the boxes and had their signature on the page. Every time they opened the box, I thought they might be like the signature cards we use today. Some people mentioned the bank as the owner of the box, but there was no clear list of items inside. I noticed that the signatures on the bank papers changed depending on who opened the box. I want to make a better list of everything before we rush into anything. The list for the box we opened only had a code and a number. Wait a minute. Let me check. Yes, look here. The code is PDF from 1936 for this box. All those loans were paid off, and it looks like they were all from 1936. I guess that means these are paid loans. So, 1936 makes sense. I think I will write down the names of the people or businesses that had a paid loan here." Kathy picked up the book from the table when Garrett set it down and turned to a new page. She said, "Look, Garrett, Box 19 has a code for 1936 to 1945, and Box 17 has a code for the 1960s, but there are no numbers. Let's check them out now." "Oh, come on, Kathy, let's take this step by step. We will tell the story in the order it happened." "Okay, but let's hurry," said one friend. The two friends went back to the keyboard and switched the key for Box 1. Garrett picked up the key for Box 2, and they went back to the table to look inside. They spent the rest of the afternoon opening the boxes set aside for the bank. Most of the boxes had records in them. To their surprise, 2 boxes had gold inside. One box held coins, while the other had small gold bars and a few silver ones. Finally, they opened Box 17. When they did, everything made sense. It was full of special printed stock certificates. Some of the certificates were for companies that still existed. One certificate was for the Union Pacific Railroad with 300 shares. Another was for the Ford Motor Company with 200 shares. There was also one for John Deere for 200 shares. Garrett and Kathy found many certificates from companies they didn't know. One certificate caught their eye. It was for 100 shares of the Computing Tabulating Recording Company, issued in 1911. They made a list of the companies and how many shares each had, then carefully put the certificates back and moved on to the next box. They were disappointed when they found Box 18 was empty, just like a few others that were marked for bank use. When they opened Box 19, they discovered it was packed with items that were now very rare. It was full of bearer bonds, which are bonds paid to whoever holds them, without keeping any record of who owns them. Once again, they noted the company name, the face value, the issue date, and the maturity date of the bonds before locking the box again. Finally, they opened the last locked box and took stock of what was inside. The two friends put the last key in place, left the books and papers on the shelf in the vault, and then closed and locked it up. They stepped out of the bank, locked the door behind them, and made their way back to Garrett's apartment. There, they each poured a glass of iced tea and went out onto the balcony to enjoy the evening as it settled over their small town. As they relaxed, they waved at the occasional car that drove by and even called out to a few friends who passed. Around 8:30 p.m., Kathy got up and said, "Well, I guess it's time for me to head home. Garrett, thanks for letting me stay at your camp on Friday and Saturday, and especially for letting me help you look through the vault. I had a great time. When do you plan to check the stocks and bonds to find out how much they are worth? Garrett, you might find out you're really rich. What if some of those companies like Ford, Deere, and the railroads are still doing well? I'm so happy for you. What do you plan to do with all that money you might have?" "I'm not sure what to think right now, Kathy. I need to talk to Mr. Douglas. We need to find out what things are worth before we think too much about this. I just hope Mom doesn't get even more upset if she hears about it." The next day, everyone went to work after she finished her tasks. Kathy did some research on what they found in the bank and tried to find someone who knew about coins and old money. At noon, Garrett called Mr. Douglas to talk about his finds. Mr. Douglas wasn't available, so Garrett asked him to call back in the evening if he could. Mr. Douglas returned Garrett's call around 9 p.m. When he learned what Garrett wanted to talk about, he felt both excited and nervous. He said, "Are you telling me that Vault has held all that money and those certificates all this time?" "Yes," Garrett replied. "As far as I know, it hasn't been opened since. Great-great-grandpa locked it and closed the bank down. It hasn't been opened in years. That's surprising. I have a lot of questions. You mentioned that Grandpa left me the bank building and everything inside it, but you also said that the bank accounts need some legal work and the investment accounts were set up differently. What does that mean for the stocks and bonds we found in the safe, if they still have value? And what about the cash? Is that part of a bank account since it was in the bank? Or is it mine because it was in my safe and belonged to the bank? You said I got the bank and its contents through a special legal document. From what I understand, you own everything in the bank. The cash, stocks, and bonds are yours because they were inside the bank when you took over. We'll need to show that the stocks were kept in the bank and then change their ownership to your name. The bonds should be easy to transfer too. We need to find out the real value of everything soon, including the money, coins, and gold bars. It's really important that we don't tell anyone about what's in that old vault. If word gets out, there's a chance someone might break in and steal it. I'm worried that the old vault isn't as safe as newer ones. A skilled thief could get inside pretty easily. I think we should take the valuable items and bonds out of the vault and hand them over to a broker quickly. Tomorrow I will start looking for experts who can help us figure out what everything is worth and find ways to keep it safe. The rest of the week felt more normal compared to the last few weeks. Garrett went to work, came home, and did some small tasks in his apartment. He even started cleaning out the junk from the bank, sorting through it to see if anything was valuable. He was about to throw a lot of things away when Kathy jumped in. She said it was all old stuff, and there might be someone out there who would pay good money for it. Kathy took control of what Garrett called the junk and started trying to sell it, just like she had with some other items from the bank. Garrett once talked to Kathy about her search for someone who could help with the coins. Then, on Tuesday the next week, Garrett got a call from Mr. Douglas. After the usual greetings, Mr. Douglas said, "Garrett, I've made a few calls this past week and my team has made even more. We've found 3 brokers in one auction house who are interested in the coins and gold in your vault. I've also found a stockbroker willing to research the value of your stock and bond certificates. He'll do the research for free if you agree to open an account with him and put all the valuable certificates in there." "That sounds great," said Garrett. "I'm happy to help with that. What about the money and bars? How do we take care of it?" "Well, that's a bit more tricky. The auction house and 2 dealers will send someone to your vault to check the items. The other dealers want you to bring the items to them for checking. I suggest we go with the first option and do the checks at your place. If we can't agree on one of those checks, we can arrange to send the items to the third person for their opinion. The bars will need to go to someone who deals with them. If the checkers don't want to handle it, that's fine." "Sounds good to me. When will we do this?" "You can do it when it suits you. You will need to be there for the check. I also recommend having a witness or 2 with you. I can send someone from my team if you want. In fact, I really suggest you let me do that. We should make copies of the certificates before you give them to the stockbroker. We should take pictures of the coins and bills and write down receipts for everything in the vault as we send items to different dealers and auction houses. All right, we can do it your way. I can take time off work any day if you let me know a few days in advance. Do you want to make the appointments, or should I? Will all the appraisers come at the same time? I can handle the appointments for you. I think it might be better if not all the businesses are there together. How about we have one appraiser look at the items one week and then let the others come in the following weeks?" Good plan. 2 weeks later, the first appraiser showed up. They arrived at the bank around 8:30 on a Wednesday morning. After a few quick greetings, they asked if they could start right away. There was a small team of 3 people: the main appraiser, a clerk, and a photographer named Garrett, along with Elizabeth Prevost. Douglas's paralegal was there too. Around 10 a.m., Kathy arrived just as the appraiser entered the vault and saw the piles of money and coins. He paused and blinked in surprise. He licked his lips and turned to his photographer, saying, "Get a photo of the stacks before we start. Make sure to take clear pictures of each bill and coin as we go. Front and back," the appraiser added. He then looked at Garrett and said, "I'm afraid we might not finish this today. There's a lot more here than I expected. Do you have internet access here? Should we work in this room? Or can we take the items out to the main part of the building? We can work wherever you think is best." "I do have Wi-Fi if you need to go online," Garrett replied. The team got to work right away, with Elizabeth watching them. Garrett and Kathy helped by carrying items in and out of the vault as they worked. Around noon, Garrett said he would go to the cafe and get lunch for everyone. They decided it would be nice to take a break from work and eat together. The team leader asked Garrett to bring back food. They worked late and didn't finish until almost 11 p.m. When they were leaving, the appraiser told them, "We should have your official appraisal ready by the end of next week. We will send you a copy along with an offer to buy the collection, if you are interested." The appraiser added that they could also help if the team wanted to sell items one by one through their company. The next Tuesday, the auction house came to do the same kind of appraisal as the coin dealer had done before. They promised to send their value estimate and offer to auction the collection later. The third group of appraisers came the week after the auction house visit. When they saw how much money was in the vault, the appraisers wouldn't evaluate it right there, and Garrett wouldn't let them take anything. So they left without checking the contents of the vault. Garrett was still waiting for his stockbroker to call about the value of his stocks and bonds when the second appraiser left. Many of the stock certificates were for companies that no one had heard of before. He didn't think they would be worth much, but the broker and his lawyer thought it was a good idea to research them. They knew a few of the certificates had to be valuable because the companies were still popular. Names like Ford, Union Pacific, and John Deere came up. For instance, even if none of the other certificates were worth anything, Garrett had enough money to completely pay for the repairs on his building and still have some left over if he decided to sell his certificates. Late that Thursday evening, after the last appraiser left, Garrett got a phone call from his stockbroker. This time, the broker sounded a bit different when he started speaking. He was more attentive and seemed to be trying hard to please. Garrett couldn't quite figure it out, but the overall tone of the call felt changed from the start. After the usual greetings, the broker said, "Garrett, I really don't know where to begin this talk. First, let me say you are a very rich man. As we thought, some of the stock certificates we received from you were not worth anything. The companies had either gone bankrupt or were no longer around. This made up almost half of the certificates. As you remember, many of the stock certificates were from well-known companies that are still in business today. The tricky part was keeping track of stock splits and a few reverse splits. One of the certificates was renamed in 1924 and became quite famous. Over the years, there were many stock splits and price increases. That certificate is now worth over $500,000. If we gather everything for you, there will be just over $1,942,000 in your account. All the bonds have matured, and we are working on collecting the money. This might take some time because of how old they are. On the other hand, the stocks are already in your account. You can sell them whenever you want or keep them. We are still trying to figure out what happened to the dividends that should have been paid on the stocks. We will update you on our search for those," Garrett said in surprise. He didn't know what to say or do. He couldn't believe that much money was real. He thought he might not need to work at all if he didn't want to. Gramps hadn't done much work that Garrett knew of, but he always seemed to have enough money and more. Sure, he worked his small 180-acre farm, but it didn't seem to bring in a lot of money. Garrett said, "I have a guess about where the money went. My grandfather gave me these certificates when he passed away. He didn't seem to work very hard, but he always had enough money. I think he was getting dividends from his stocks. His name was Jerome Vance, and he lived at R1, Box 174, same town as me." "Okay, that's a good starting point. We have the will and the papers to show he owned these things, and you do too. So it should be pretty simple to check. Let me know if you need any help, Mr. Mance. Good night." Garrett sat on his balcony, looking over the main street of town. The streetlights flickered on as darkness settled in. All he could think about was his recent talk with the stockbroker. He went from not having a place to stay to living in a big apartment in a nice old building, and he felt like everything was going his way. Now he learns that he has millions of dollars and could live in a really nice house if he wanted. He probably wouldn't need to work ever again if he didn't want to. What? Garrett felt sleepy, and his back hurt from sitting on the hard deck chair. He got up and stumbled into his house to go to bed. Even though he was tired, he found it hard to fall asleep. His mind kept running through possibilities. He imagined spending his millions over and thought about what he should do next. In the end, he decided to keep doing what he was doing for now until he found something he really wanted to pursue. After all, it worked for his grandfather, right? He also decided to make his apartment the coziest place to live. He imagined all the things he could do, and he planned to fix up the bank to its former beauty. Then he would either rent it out as an office or use it for himself. The estimates for the value of the coins and the precious metal finally came in from the appraisers. The dealer thought everything was worth $970,000 and offered to buy the collection for $750,000. The auction house believed the coins and currency could sell for $900,000, while the bullion was worth around $300,000. They would take a flat 18% fee from the sales. Garrett could let the auction house sell the collection if he wanted. He didn't need money right away, so he chose to let them auction off the coins, currency, and bullion. If it sold for what they thought, he would get about $984,000, which was much more than the dealer's offer. He decided it was worth the risk. The auction house sent a secure truck to collect the items. It took almost a whole day to go through the collection again and prepare a receipt for Garrett. During this time, many people from the town came to the bank to see what was happening. When someone got too close to the armored car, the guards kindly but firmly asked them to step back. By the time the truck was fully loaded and left, people were talking a lot about what had happened. When Garrett went into the cafe for dinner, he was almost surrounded by people wanting to know what was going on. All he would say was that he found some things from his great-grandfather that he needed to send for safekeeping. He mentioned his insurance company wanted the extra protection. Garrett went back to his usual routine. He kept his same job, drove his old Ranger pickup, and wore and ate the same things. Soon enough, the excitement died down, and life went back to normal. Garrett did start having a few more meals at the cafe, but that wasn't a big change. Lots of single people in town and even some married men ate there at least once a day. While he was at the cafe, Garrett began talking more with Sarah, a waitress who was about 2 years younger than he was. He finally got her to agree to go out with him. Garrett and Sarah went on a date on Friday night. They saw a movie and then went to his apartment for a drink. The cafe was just closing when they walked up the stairs to his place. Some of her friends saw them and made friendly comments. Around 1 a.m., Garrett took Sarah home. He felt a bit let down, but he wasn't really shocked. Sarah had a reputation for being a flirt, and she lived up to it. It was frustrating for him. He had hoped for more, but it was clear they didn't have much in common. Garrett decided to write off the date and move forward. On Saturday morning, around 8:45 a.m., still feeling tired, he walked into the cafe for his coffee, breakfast, and to hear the latest news. The usual group was there, a mix of local farmers and other neighbors taking it easy since it was the weekend or because they needed some time off. Garrett noticed Bill, Kathy, and Sally, Bill's wife and Kathy's mom, sitting at their usual table. He walked over and took a seat, as he often did when he arrived before them. Kathy shot him a hard look and stayed silent. When Bill and Sally greeted him with a good morning, Garrett replied in kind. "Looks like it's going to be another hot day. I'm glad we're not working today." "I don't think I could handle it for long," he added. Kathy pressed her lips tight and glared at Garrett, then said sharply, "Well, maybe if you weren't out late for no reason, you wouldn't be so tired." Garrett just looked at her, shook his head, and went back to talking with Bill. Sarah came over to the table, put her hand on Garrett's shoulder, and said, "Good morning, Garrett. I really enjoyed our coffee last night." Kathy let out a snort and said, "Yeah, I bet you loved that, huh?" Sally turned to her, looking surprised. "What did you just say?" she asked. Kathy didn't seem sorry and replied, "You heard me. Can we just forget it? You know what? I've had enough. I'm going to walk home." She pushed her chair back loudly and left the cafe quickly, letting the door close behind her. As she walked, she wiped her face as if she was trying to dry tears. Garrett turned to Bill and asked, "What just happened?" Bill and Sally exchanged glances before he sighed and said, "Garrett, if I have to explain, you're not as smart as I thought." Garrett looked at Sally, who continued to stare at him. He shrugged and took a sip of his coffee. "I guess I'm not as smart as you believed. I really don't know why she's in such a bad mood today." His face turned red and he stumbled over his words. "Oh, it's a woman thing," Sally frowned and said. "You men really don't get it. You hear a woman upset and all you think is that it must be that time of the month or something. Come on, Garrett. Just think about what you've done recently that you shouldn't have done. Maybe that will help you figure it out." Sally glanced at Bill and said, "I'm done. Are you?" Bill nodded and stood up. Sally walked toward the door while Bill tried to find some change for Sarah. He looked at Garrett and shook his head. "Well, maybe this will pass, but I think you really messed up this time, Garrett. I guess I'll see you at work on Monday." Garrett shrugged and kept eating. He leaned back in his chair, sipping his coffee and joining the chat happening around him. Just then, a couple of younger friends walked into the cafe. Pete and Trevor smiled when they saw Garrett and came over to his table. They pulled out chairs and Pete said, "How was the date? Did you have any luck or did things not go your way like usual? Now that I think about it, why did you go out with that girl when you had someone as great as Kathy interested in you? It seems like a waste. When did you and Kathy stop seeing each other, by the way?" "What? Kathy and I aren't broken up. Come on, we were just friends." and you should know better than to talk about a date like that. Sarah and I went to a movie and then spent some time talking before I took her home. Pete and Trevor laughed. Then Trevor said, "Yeah, he didn't have any luck like the rest of us. But hold on a minute. Why were you asking about Kathy? She seemed really upset this morning and left to walk home as soon as I got here. Do you know what's going on with her?" Trevor asked. "Let's think about this. You and Kathy have been spending a lot of time together for months now. She has been at your house more than her own during that time. You take Sarah out on a date, and Kathy is really upset, but you don't understand why. Wow, are you clueless or what? You really messed up with her. You're lucky she didn't react badly. But we were just friends. She was helping me clean the apartment and go through some of my grandpa's old stuff, that's all. Yeah, I guess that's why she said no to everyone else who wanted to date her since she started spending time with you. She's just a friend, but she's not looking for a relationship with anyone right now. I bet she feels pretty down about that." Pete and Trevor started chatting with the other guys in the cafe, while Garrett sat quietly, not paying attention to the conversation. He was lost in his thoughts about the strange things that happened that morning. He couldn't help but think about the last few weeks with Kathy. Maybe there was more between them than he realized. She seemed really interested in making him happy. When she was near him, she would often touch him gently. She always greeted him with a smile. She would bring him coffee, tea, or whatever she thought he might like. Was he not seeing the signs? Did Kathy like him as more than just a friend? And what did he feel about her? Right now, he felt confused. He didn't want to hurt Kathy. What were his feelings for her? He definitely enjoyed having her around. She was nicer and more attractive than Sarah, and she seemed more mature, too. Garrett, feeling very mixed up, pushed his chair in and stood up. He walked to the register to pay for his breakfast and coffee. While the cafe owner, Betty Jean, was making his change, Sarah came over and put her arm around him. With a smile, she asked, "So, what are you going to do today, Garrett?" He replied, "I'm not sure. I have some work to do on the remodel, but I need to buy some materials first. I'll probably go to town for that. I get off at 2. "Oh, that's nice. You'll have most of the day to relax then. Well, see you later." Garrett left the cafe without noticing the surprised look on his face. Betty Jean quickly turned away to hide her smile. It seemed like the date didn't go well for Garrett, but from how Sarah had been talking all morning, everyone else thought differently. Garrett seemed lost in thought. Kathy nearly rushed out of the cafe when Garrett joined her. Yep, that guy was in trouble. Now he had 2 women unhappy with him. Garrett hopped into his truck and drove to Neosho, where he visited the friendly people at Loewy's. They were happy to sell him the supplies he needed to start working on the first floor of the bank. He still hadn't figured out what he wanted to do with his apartment on the 2nd floor, so he decided to focus on the 1st floor while he thought about it some more. That summer, work slowed down for the construction company where Garrett was employed. This happened on a Friday, 3 weeks after his date with Sarah. When Bill, the boss, handed out paychecks, he said, "I'm sorry, everyone, but we need to let some of you go." He explained that they would reduce the number of work teams from 4 to 3. This meant the last 6 people hired would have to go. Bill looked at Garrett and said, "Garrett, I'm sorry, but you're one of them. And George, you are too." He handed them both envelopes with an extra week's pay to help them for now. He added that when business got better, they could come back to work. Garrett wasn't too upset about losing his job because he had some money from an inheritance and also made money from renting out a property. However, he felt bad for George. George was Catholic and Hispanic, and like many married Hispanic families, he and his wife had a lot of kids. This layoff was going to be hard for them. On Saturday morning, Garrett was sitting on his balcony, enjoying the nice weather when he got an unexpected visitor. He saw his mother pull up in her car. Instead of going into the cafe, a place she usually wouldn't go because it wasn't fancy enough, she started climbing the stairs to his apartment. Garrett was trying to think of how to react when he heard his front door open and realized his mother was walking around inside. This upset him for a few reasons. In their neighborhood, it was common for family members to enter each other's homes without knocking. Even some close friends did the same. But his mother doing this, especially after their past arguments, really bothered him. Just as Garrett was about to stand up and go inside to see what she was up to, she stepped outside onto the balcony next to him. She looked down at him and said, Well, this place is a mess. I heard you fixed up the apartments and are trying to rent them out. But if your place is anything to go by, your tenant must really be in a tough spot. I've seen barns that look better than that. Good morning, Mom. What brings you to my little home this morning? And thanks for the review of my place. Don't get too upset. We still haven't received the rent you owe your sister. We really need the money. I was hoping to get something from you today. Sorry, but I'm out of cash. I lost my job yesterday. I think the money has been taken care of, though. If I remember correctly, the lawyer said he would put the right rental amount into the trust fund. Have you checked with him? No, I haven't. You owe that money to us, not our trust fund. I want it now. How much can you give me today? Nothing. I'll call Mr. Douglas on Monday and ask about it. His mother frowned at him and said, "Oh, don't bother. I'm sure he'll say to let him handle it, and we both know what that means. We'll just manage without it." His mother stomped off down the stairs and drove away fast, making her tires squeal. Garrett fell back into his old habits. He had money to spend, but no job. The fish were biting. So what else could he do? Of course, he went fishing. He went camping. He relaxed on his balcony. He visited the cafe and chatted with his friends. Occasionally, he saw Kathy, but aside from a quick hello or good morning, they didn't talk much. The summer came to an end, and fall arrived with not much to do. Garrett signed up for college again and went to class part-time. More often than not, you would find him in the student union, playing cards or pool. Still, he attended enough classes and studied enough to keep up with his studies. On New Year's Day, Garrett went to the cafe for his usual coffee. This time, the conversation was loud and serious. There had been a party at the home of one of the property owners that Kathy and her mother helped manage. The property owner's son tried to get something from Kathy that she didn't want to give. She pushed him away and tried to escape. In his anger, he hit her several times. Some other guests heard Kathy screaming from a closed room. They quickly broke the door down in time to stop him from hurting her more. Kathy ended up in the hospital, while the man who attacked her was arrested. Instead of laughing like the other men when they heard Kathy had fought back, Garrett felt a strong wave of anger. After breakfast, Garrett drove his truck to the hospital. On the way, he stopped at Walmart to buy flowers and a funny card for Kathy. When he arrived at the hospital and entered the room, he saw Kathy lying in bed with her mother reading in a chair next to her. When Sally noticed Garrett, her eyes widened, and she smiled as she stood up from her chair. She said, "I'll just go to the cafeteria for some coffee." Kathy turned to watch her mom leave and saw Garrett. Her face looked bad. She was hurt and gasped when she tried to roll towards Garrett. She asked, "Garrett, what are you doing here?" "I heard you were hurt and wanted to see how you are," he said. He put the flowers on her small table and then sat next to her. He took her hand after she picked up the card and said, "Kathy, I'm sorry. I didn't know how to make things better. I've missed you a lot, and now I see you're hurt." "What are you talking about, Garrett? How did I get hurt?" she replied. "If I hadn't made such a foolish choice, maybe you wouldn't have gone to that party with that guy. This isn't the first time he's been like this. His dad got him out of trouble before. He might do it again this time, too." "I'll make sure he pays for what he's done," Garrett said. Kathy tried to laugh, but she suddenly stopped, wincing in pain instead. She said, "Garrett, you're such a goof. I guess I should have said something too, but I thought we understood each other. When you went out with that girl, I just couldn't handle it. Kathy, I never thought she was flirting with me like she does with the other guys. I asked her out, like many others do. I'm not sure why I kept trying. It felt like a game. She turned me down a couple of times, but I didn't give up. Flirting with her was fun, but honestly, Kathy, she's not very bright. Even before you got upset, I had decided that my interest in Sarah was just a one-time thing. She's playful, but there's not much going on upstairs. I kept wishing I was with you that night. I didn't realize you thought we were more than friends, and I didn't want to ruin that. But then I did. I saw tears in Kathy's eyes. Her voice trembled as she reached for Garrett again. I only went on 2 dates after you, and they were with different guys. They just didn't measure up to you, Garrett. When I was with them, I kept thinking about how much fun we could have if you were there instead. I wasn't sure how to change that. But now it's all better. Kathy, can we stay friends and maybe go on some dates too? I want to spend more time with you." Kathy interrupted him with a laugh, saying, "You silly! What do you think we've been doing?" We hung out on your balcony. We went to town together. We swam, camped, and fished together. It was just the two of us. Isn't that what dates are?" "Yeah, I guess they are, but I didn't realize it," Garrett replied. Kathy smiled and said, "Well, now you know." Just then, Garrett heard a sound and turned to see Sally standing in the doorway with a smile. She said, "Well, I guess it's true. It really is good to see you two together again. Now, Garrett, see if you can keep it that way. If you're going to be here a while, can I go home and tidy up? I'll be back around 1 or 2. "Sure, that's fine. I'll keep an eye on her for a bit." After Sally left, Garrett took her chair and started talking to Kathy. They caught up on what was happening in their lives, then talked about something important. Kathy said, "Garrett, I'm really sorry your dad had to let you go. Have you found another job yet?" Garrett replied, "No, I haven't really looked for work. I decided to go back to college. I'm taking some business classes and some courses in construction and project management. I enjoy working with my hands, but I'm still unsure about what I want to do after I finish. I know I want to stay in the Guard for at least 20 years. I got promoted to sergeant last month, and the captain is encouraging me to go to officer's candidate school." Garrett continued, "I can go to OCS after I finish college and get my degree. I only have 1 more year after this. The captain thinks I've really changed for the better, and he believes I would make a good officer. Do you like being in the Guard that much? What if they call you up again instead of you becoming an officer? Have you thought about staying in construction? Or maybe you could buy properties to rent out or even do both. You know, I got my real estate license so I could work in my mom's office. I see many houses and other buildings out there that could be good investments. You could buy a house now and then, fix it up and sell it for a profit. Yeah, I guess I could go into construction or rentals, but I'm not sure if that's what I want. It's a shame so many houses in town are still empty. Some of them are really in bad shape, and even if they were fixed up, they wouldn't sell for much. I worry that the old town is lost and doesn't even know it. It's a bit too far to get to jobs in the city for people living in the suburbs, and there isn't much nearby to make people want to stay there. People tend to move to where the jobs are, or when they get older, they move into town to be closer to family or healthcare. I think I will go for OCS and stick with the National Guard. I can keep working part-time, serve in the Guard, and still manage to live well. Gramps left me just enough money to manage. But is that really all you want to aim for? I can get along with the Guard if that's what you want to do, but we need more than just that. You know, even if you didn't do something here, you could try elsewhere. I'll think about it, Kath. I enjoy working on home projects and building things, and I could be in charge of my own time if I focused on my own work. I kind of like that idea. After Kathy got out of the hospital, she and Garrett became a couple again. They were always together, just like before his bad date with Sarah. 3 months later, Jeffrey Goddard, who hurt Kathy, went to court. This time, his family's money didn't save him completely, but it still helped. He got 3 months in county jail and had to go to a treatment center to quit drinking. Neither Kathy nor Garrett was fully happy with the outcome, but at least he got some punishment this time. On April 1st, Kathy arrived at Garrett's home around her usual time, right after finishing work. She cheerfully jumped onto his lap. After a quick hello kiss, she excitedly said, "Garrett, I heard some exciting news. It's more than just a rumor. You know the White Oak Cabinet Shop? It burned down about a month ago in Neo Show. Well, they just signed a deal to buy the old Eagle pitcher plant up on the hill here in town. They want to set it up and start making cabinets there. They'll move all their work down here. They currently have 43 workers and plan to hire at least 7 to 10 more. Some of the workers were living in company-owned apartments that got damaged in the fire and are now unlivable. I think we could rent some houses here in town if we had them ready. That sounds great, but we don't have enough houses, and I bet those workers already found new places to live." "Yeah, I'm sure they do, but they won't want to drive 22 miles to work every day when they can drive just 1 mile or even walk when the weather is nice. I really think you should buy those 4 houses we talked about in town and fix them up a bit so you can rent them out. I don't know. Maybe it's a good idea to think about it. So, what do you want to do today? Should we look at the houses again? Besides that, how about we go to town for a bit and get a pizza?" While they were eating their pizza, Kathy made a face and said, "This place used to be really good. I think I can make a better pizza than what they've served lately, and their salad bar isn't great anymore either. Yeah, you're right. Your pizza is amazing. We should have just stayed home and made pizza instead. Well, that wouldn't have worked. I know we don't have the right ingredients, and I bet you don't either. No, you're right. Well, if you're finished, let's hit the road. I need to make one more stop before we go back home. They got into Garrett's old truck and drove to the mall. They walked around most of the stores inside. Then Garrett led Kathy into a jewelry shop. A clerk came over and asked if they needed help. Garrett replied, "Yes, I'm Garrett Mance. We're looking for a ring." The clerk smiled and said, "Of course. Let me check if it's ready." When the woman left, Kathy looked at Garrett and asked, "Why are you getting a ring? You don't usually wear jewelry." Garrett responded, "No, I don't, but it's not for me. I was hoping you would wear it. It's an engagement ring, and I was asking if you would marry me." Kathy raised an eyebrow and replied, "Wow, that's the strangest proposal I've ever heard. Is that really the best you can do?" Garrett shrugged and said, "Well, I did my best, but yes, I really want you to marry me. Now, let me see that ring." The clerk smiled as she returned, just as Kathy finished speaking. She looked at Kathy and said, "I have to agree with you. Are you sure you want to marry someone who doesn't appreciate you like that?" "Oh, yes. You have no idea. Now let me see my ring," Kathy exclaimed. "Oh, it's beautiful." She put the ring on her finger and jumped up to hug Garrett. Soon the happy couple was leaving the mall. Kathy leaned against Garrett, resting her head on his shoulder and wrapping her arm around his waist. Every so often, she lifted her hand to admire her ring. That night, for the first time, Kathy did not go home after their date. The next morning, after they had spent time together, Garrett said, "I guess I'll call Mr. Douglas today and see what he thinks about your idea. If you and your mom keep managing the properties, we might be able to take on a couple more rentals. We can think about fixing up houses, but I'm not really interested in that for some reason." "I have enough money for everything I need, and I really don't want to work too hard," Kathy replied. "I'm thinking about planting some crops on Graham's old farm and running rental properties on the side. I believe that will make me happy. It worked well for him. We will earn more money than he did because we still have his stocks, and I have put a lot of the money from the bank into good investments. Then, there is the money from the rentals and what I earn as a guard. I think that will be enough for me. Plus, as I move up in my rank, I can take on extra shifts as a guard and earn more that way. Well, whatever you think, love." Kathy gave him a quick kiss and hurried to the door before she left. She said, "I need to get home and change so I can get to work. Mom will want to hear all the details before morning. You can count on that. See you tonight." Mr. Douglas had the chance to see Garrett before he went home that afternoon. During their talk, he said to Garrett, "I think rental housing is a good idea, but you should create a limited liability company, or LLC, to keep you safe from lawsuits. I can help you set it up for about $250. It will take me a day or two to get it ready. Then we'll wait for the state to finish the process. What name do you want for it?" "Let's go with Jam Properties, LLC," Garrett replied. When he got home that evening, Kathy was waiting for him before he could sit down. "So, what did he say?" she asked. "He thinks forming an LLC is a great plan to protect us from any legal issues. He'll handle it. We can start buying those houses and do the paperwork under Jam Properties, LLC. Oh, and I really want to keep my name out of it if we can. They'll see me working on the buildings and think I'm just a maintenance worker. I'd rather not have Mom asking too many questions. If she or a bee smells money, they'll show up." It took Garrett all summer to fix up the first two houses. They were smaller, around 1,200 to 1,400 square feet, and were single-family rentals. The other two were two-story houses that he planned to turn into duplexes, with one apartment on top and one below. These would need more work, but each one would be about 1,200 square feet. To his surprise, he rented the two single-family houses before finishing the renovations. They rented for $900 each month. He paid only $93,275 for all four houses. The cost to fix up the first two was an extra $27,000, and he expected to spend another $40,000 on the other two houses. It seemed he would make about $3,300 each month, or around 24.75% a year, before expenses like taxes, insurance, and maintenance lowered that amount a bit. But Kathy said he didn't know how much it would really be at this point. In the past, about 24% of the total rent went towards costs for the coming year. Garrett kept busy fixing up the houses and his apartment at the back. He took a break for a wedding in June, but the honeymoon only lasted a week. After that, he and Kathy returned home to work on their dream. They found some time to fish and relax by the river after finishing the houses. Kathy and her mom took care of managing the rentals, just like they did with the apartments in the back. They still had not figured out what to do with the downstairs part of the bank building, which had a vault. They thought it really should be used as some type of office, so they started to fix it up. So far, no one was interested in renting it as an office. For the past 2 years, Betty Jean often complained about feeling tired from running the cafe. At 63 years old, she wanted to retire. Her husband was already retired, and she wanted to spend more time with him. One morning, when Garrett and Kathy stopped by for coffee, they noticed 2 new signs in the window. One sign said that the store was going out of business and would close for good on December 31st. The other sign said, "For sale." After finishing their coffee, they chatted with Betty Jean while paying their bill. Kathy said, "I can't believe you're really closing. We'll miss you so much. What will you do next?" Betty Jean replied, "I'm not sure, but I think it's time for a change. We plan to spend the cold months in Florida. I hope we have enough money to enjoy our retirement. We won't be lavish, but we want to have some fun while we can." Kathy nodded and said, "I understand that. What are you asking for the business?" Betty Jean replied, "We're not exactly sure, but we thought we'd ask for $170,000. Kathy looked surprised, just like Garrett. She gasped and said, "Oh, Betty Jean, I know you have a good breakfast and lunch crowd, but do you think that's a bit high? We know that asking for that much money is tough, but we almost need to get that amount to break even and cover the realtor's fees after we list the place. What I don't get is this. How much do we make from the building? And how much time is left on the contract? That sounds like a big penalty." "Oh no, dear, we don't rent the building." "Well, we do, but we own both of these buildings and rent out the apartments above, just like Garrett does with the back unit. We bought them when Lynn sold her part. Remember when we fixed them up? We bought them right before we started the renovations." "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know. I think the $170,000 is still high, but not too bad now. We know it's high, but we wanted to leave some space for negotiating on the contract." That evening, Garrett watched as Kathy typed away on her computer. He could see she was working on a spreadsheet, but he didn't know what she was doing exactly. She switched between several spreadsheets in their finance program while she worked. She looked up at Garrett and said, "I think we should buy the buildings from Betty Jean and her husband. If we pay what they want, we could earn nearly 19% on the 4 apartments and the empty store building between the bank and cafe. Let's say the apartments rent for $400 a month each, and we get $1,000 for the store. If we can buy the buildings for $150,000 and keep those rents, our earnings would be about 20.5%. I know it's not as good as what we make on the houses, but we don't have as much money invested in them. We haven't counted our work as a cost. Plus, the buildings are in great shape. I'm fine with that if you want. We have the money for it, but it has to be the same as before. You and your mom will take care of them, and I'll handle the maintenance, and we need to keep it a secret that we own them. What about the cafe? You didn't include it in the rent plans. I think if you included that, you could make about the same money as the houses and apartments we have now. I'm surprised you forgot about that. Since we're talking about it, what are we going to do with the bank? It's so far from everything. No one wants to rent it as an office. I'm almost ready to give up on it." Kathy looked a bit guilty for a moment, then said, "I kept the cafe idea out on purpose. I think I found a way to use the main floor of the bank. I want to run the cafe myself and serve breakfast and lunch. I only want a small menu, but I want to try it for a bit. If it doesn't work, we can always find someone else to run the cafe. As for the office, even though I'm not working with Mom anymore, she's having some trouble with her boss. The father of the person who hurt me is making things hard for Mom and her boss. He is thinking about taking his houses away from the management company again because he doesn't want Mom involved with them. I had an idea that Mom could start a real estate office and management firm in the old bank building. I know we don't have a big enough market here for her to earn a lot, but she wants to take it easy and retire soon. I believe this could really help her. She could manage our properties for the rent if you agree. I also thought we could make a door between the cafe and the building next door to open a small grocery store. We could sell some items there, and it could also help the cafe. We could buy the cafe supplies through the store. Garrett shrugged and said he didn't mind Mom using the bank for her office, and he liked the idea of getting free management, but he wasn't so sure about the cafe and the store. After finishing the lunch rush at the cafe, you knew you'd face at least a 10-hour day. If the store was open, that time would stretch even longer. You had to open the cafe by 6 a.m. at the latest, and you couldn't close before 1:30 or 2 p.m. The store should open early and close by 6 p.m. too. It felt like we had to work every day of the week. When would we get some time to ourselves? That thought bothered me. I hoped we could keep some help from Betty Jean. I knew that when Betty Jean was not here, Doris ran the cafe. Maybe she would stay and help me. I didn't want as many items on the menu as they have now. I wanted to stick with classic breakfast options. For lunch, I planned to serve burgers, fries, a few sandwiches, and in winter, soup every day. I would have one special plate lunch each day, and definitely my pizza. My plate lunches would be simple and cheap to make so I could sell them for a fair price. If everything goes well, we might open on Friday and Saturday nights and have a nice meal on Sunday for the church members. We can use the cafe cash register to handle store sales so we won't need much extra help. If you want to give it a try, I'll support you. But I want to make sure we still spend time together as a family. And what about when we have kids? I really don't want to hire a babysitter. Betty Jean agreed to sell the buildings for $155,000, including all the equipment, since there was no fee for a realtor. Kathy and her mom took charge without any problems. To her surprise and Kathy's joy, her new menu and hours worked really well. In fact, her business actually grew for breakfast and lunch compared to Betty Jean's. A few people were unhappy about not being able to get dinner, but it turned out that the numbers for the store were actually better than Betty Jean's. They didn't have the extra worker costs for the usual late afternoon business or the expenses linked to dinner, which didn't sell very well. The small store made money from the start, but the earnings were not large. A family would have a hard time living off the profits from the cafe and store together. One morning, Garrett was at the cafe, chatting and drinking coffee with the regulars. When Pete and Trevor came in and ordered, they joined the talk. Trevor turned to Garrett and asked, "Hey, what's this I hear about Betty getting married?" "I don't know," Garrett replied. "I haven't seen or spoken to her or Mom in months. Who's the lucky guy?" "Only one of the richest guys in Neo Show. She's marrying into real money." "Really? I heard she's marrying Jeffrey Godfrey. They're planning a wedding in June and everything. They've already torn down your grandpa's house and are building a huge new mansion instead. Now you two will be neighbors." Kathy overheard part of the chat and said, "Oh no, does she know what he's like?" She looked at Garrett and said, "We need to warn her. I'm not sure if she knows or not, but warning her probably won't help. I think we should get a copy of the news about his past court issues when he hurt you and give it to her. I doubt it will change anything. He really knows how to charm people when he wants something, especially from a woman. He is exactly what she looks for. He's probably rich, or at least she thinks he is." Later that evening, Kathy pushed Garrett to call B, even though he didn't really want to. When he finally called her, she didn't sound happy. "What do you want, Garrett?" she said. "I'm busy." "I was at the cafe this morning and heard you're marrying that Godfrey guy. I wanted to talk," he started, but she interrupted him, yelling into the phone. "You're terrible," she exclaimed. "He said you would probably try to talk badly about him and ruin our relationship. You're just jealous of his money and success. He's the nicest, most caring person I know, and everyone is being unfair to him. It's not right. Yes, I'm marrying him, and there's nothing you or anyone else can do to change that." After saying this, she ended the call, knowing that Garrett's phone was on speaker, so Kathy heard everything. He looked at her and said, "Well, I did my best. Let's just move on." As Garrett drove by BA's property, he kept an eye on the construction. When he reached his own land, it confirmed the rumors he'd heard at the coffee shop. The house was huge, and the money spent on the gates and landscaping was far beyond what anyone would expect. It was no surprise that Garrett was not invited to the wedding. He only found out about it in the local newspaper. The article described it as the biggest event in the small town of Neosho in the last 10 years. The happy couple spent their honeymoon for a month exploring Europe. After that, they settled in a new house just outside Neosho, a gift from the groom's father for their wedding. Life for Garrett and Kathy continued as it had before. But now Kathy was busier. Garrett didn't work much, yet money kept coming in. Each day he found a cozy spot in a chair at the coffee shop for his morning coffee, breakfast, and often lunch too. The townsfolk often wondered how someone who worked part-time as a maintenance man and farmed such a small piece of land could afford to eat out so often. Many thought Kathy must be treating him since they were married. Garrett became the center of attention in town, with people saying he was just like his grandfather. He farmed his small land and spent his free time hunting, fishing, or just goofing around. He seemed like a guy who never took life too seriously, but everyone agreed he was a nice person. During the summer and into the next winter, Beatrice would sometimes drive through town or stop by the post office. People noticed her more often than they did before she got married. She drove a nice Lexus SUV and always wore fancy clothes. After Christmas, she came by a little less often. Her makeup couldn't quite hide some marks that looked like bruises on her face and arms. One time, she walked carefully and seemed to hurt on one side when she moved. Kathy and Garrett talked about her sad situation but knew they couldn't help her unless she asked. They just hoped she would ask for help before it was too late. Garrett didn't like her much, but she was his sister. He felt bad for her because of what she might be going through. No one should have to face the rough treatment she was likely getting. One cold, damp evening in March, Garrett heard someone slowly coming up the stairs to their second-floor apartment. He listened closely, trying to see if it was one of the people who lived upstairs before he went back to his book while enjoying his drink. The main door opened, and then there was a soft knock at his and Kathy's door. Kathy was in the shower, so he let out a sigh, set down his glass and book, and went to answer. When he opened the door, he found Beatrice crying. She looked really upset. There was a bruise on her right arm, and the side of her face was red like she had been hurt. She looked at Garrett and said, "I know you might not want to help me, but please, can I stay here tonight?" Garrett felt torn. Part of him wanted to send Beatrice away, but he just couldn't do it. She was his sister no matter what, and she seemed to be in trouble. He would usually help people in need, so it felt right to offer her support. All this raced through his mind quickly, but Beatrice sank lower and started to turn away. He opened the door wider and said, "Come on in, Bea. You can use the spare room tonight." Kathy heard them talking and came into the room wearing her robe and drying her hair. She saw Bea and said, "Bea? What are you doing here? You look awful." Then she started to cry and fell into a chair. "You were right. He's not a good man. He became controlling right after our wedding. And then when we got home, he started hitting me. He said it was for my own good so I would learn. But it just got worse. I went to Mom for help, but she told me to tough it out. She said he makes enough money for us and that if I weren't so spoiled, he wouldn't have to punish me. Today, when I came home from shopping, he was in his office with that woman he calls his secretary. I saw them together." They both looked up, and she told me to close the door and leave. I felt lost and didn't know what to do. Like a fool, I shut the door and put my groceries away. I could hear them laughing after I left the room. Later, I noticed the young woman leave. Then Jeffrey came into the kitchen. He pushed me against the cabinets and slapped me, warning me never to interrupt him in his office again. I told him not to worry. We were done, and I was planning to file for divorce the next day. He just laughed and told me to get out of his house. I wouldn't leave, so he actually picked me up and tossed me out. Then he threw my purse after me. I went to my mom's place, and she told me to go back home and fix things with Jeffrey, but I just couldn't. I couldn't do it. Kathy moved closer and wrapped her arms around me as I cried. She held me until I calmed down and then said, "Come on, let's get you a warm shower. After that, we can get you some rest." Things got a lot worse for Bea after that night. She did file for divorce, and after a quick process in court, she was granted one. Actually, it was Jeffrey who got the divorce from her. The problem was the prenuptial agreement she signed at her mother's suggestion. In that agreement, she said that if they got a divorce, she would leave with just her personal items and $1,000 for each month of marriage, up to a total of $120,000. Sadly for Bea, this meant that Jeffrey got the house and the land, even though he owned the land before they married. After the divorce went through the courts, Bea and Jeffrey had only been married for just under 13 months. Now Bea was starting over with nothing but her clothes, some jewelry, and $12,000, She had argued about the missing $1,000, but she couldn't get it because the agreement they signed said that if the marriage ended, she would get $1,000 for each full month they were married. This could add up to a maximum of $120,000. Beatrice had given up her land that was worth around $80,000 for a month of traveling in Europe and $12,000 in cash. Now she had no job and no education to help her find one. True to her nature, Wilma wouldn't help her, and even wanted her to pay rent to stay in her family's home again. So Beatrice ended up living in small spaces, which made Wilma unhappy, but she had to stay rent-free because she was depending on her brother. She still complained a lot. Every day she found something to grumble about. She thought the apartment and her room were too tiny. She didn't like having to go to the cafe for breakfast and lunch, and she disliked how plain the food was there. She really disliked being made to spend time with the smelly farmers in their dirty clothes. One evening, things reached a breaking point before Garrett even understood how bad the situation was about to get. It got bad. Messy, and everyone was caught in the fallout by the end of the night. Beatrice was either at her best or her worst, depending on how you looked at it. She burst out of the guest bathroom wearing a robe and shaking a bottle of shampoo in her hand. She tossed the shampoo at Kathy and shouted, "You are so clueless. You know this isn't the shampoo I use. I told you exactly what to get and where to find it, and you come home with this junk. Honestly, I can't believe you do anything right." Garrett jumped up from his chair and grabbed Beatrice as she tried to hit a shocked Kathy. He held her arms and shouted, "Be quiet! I've had enough of your behavior. We helped you when you had nowhere to go, and now all you do is sit around eating our food and complaining about the home we've given you. That stops now. You need to show respect to Kathy from this point on, or you will have to leave. If you can't speak nicely, then please do not say anything. You will use the things we buy for our home. If you don't like it, go find a job and buy your own things. At the very least, you will use what we provide and stay quiet about it. Starting tomorrow, you will need to work for your keep or you will have to go. You can help Kathy at the cafe or come assist me at my job, but you will work. You will also help keep the apartment tidy. You are no longer just a guest here. It's time for you to start cleaning and picking up around here, just like we do. If you don't want to do that, then you really need to find a job that pays well so you can support yourself and get your own place." Beatrice was so surprised that she stopped fighting back and stared at Garrett. Finally, anger lit up her eyes and her face turned red. She said, "You're the last person who should talk, brother. You were so lazy that you wouldn't help Mom with the bills for our house, and then you moved out when she asked you to chip in. You totally ignored paying rent when you stayed at my house after Gramps passed away. And now you complain about helping me out? That's not fair. Plus, we both know you would probably be homeless now if it wasn't for Kathy working so hard at that little cafe. Honestly, you probably haven't put in a full day's work in your life. You think I didn't notice what you were doing when you said you were farming? Come on, you drove your little tractor around for a while, then went to the river where you wasted the rest of the day. I can only imagine how hard you work at your job." After a little while, they heard the shower running. Then it stopped, and the door opened. Since we never came back, they thought she was still in the room they let her use. Kathy went to Garrett and wrapped her arms around him. Soon, she wiped her silent tears and leaned back to look into his eyes. Kathy said, "I always knew she was trouble from when we went to school together, even though she was a few years younger than us. But tonight? Wow. Tonight was something else. Over the past few weeks, she's been getting worse. But I can't believe she would just snap like that. Believe it. I think that's how she has gotten her way for so long. It was easier for others to give in to her so she wouldn't lose her temper like she did tonight. Usually, just a little push from B would either get the person in trouble to shape up, or they would leave. I think some of her problems in her marriage come from her behavior. While that doesn't excuse him hitting her, I can see why someone might feel angry. I know he has cheated many times, but I bet she pushed him to do it even more quickly than he would on his own. Now, what are we going to do if she won't help out around here? You know she won't just agree to help in the house or with you or me. I really don't know what we will do if she doesn't chip in a bit. I'm worried that if we don't keep things as they are, she might try to get back at us for not treating her well, as she has mentioned before. Mom tried to get her to do something around the house before I left, and it turned into a mess. She didn't even try to follow Mom's request. She walked into the room like she was going to help, but ended up making a huge mess instead. One time she was supposed to make dinner, but she burnt everything on purpose. She also made a big mess all over the kitchen with ingredients everywhere. Mom left the mess for 2 days, hoping she would clean it up, but she didn't. When it started to smell bad, Mom gave up and cleaned part of it herself. She made me help with the rest, which was annoying. I'm sorry I convinced you to let her stay here. The only thing I can think of now is to make her feel uncomfortable enough to leave. If we keep bothering her to help, maybe she will leave on her own. Don't buy the things she wants. That shampoo and conditioner was a good idea because she gets upset when things don't go her way. Kathy giggled a little and said, "Well, that was an accident. I actually bought what she asked for, I think. The bottle she stormed in with was a new one for me. I didn't need it yet, but it was on sale, so I got it. I must have put it in the guest bathroom by mistake. The other bottle is probably in our bathroom under the sink. That's where I keep my extra things. Anyway, it's not a big deal tonight. Are you ready for bed now, dear?" The next morning, Garrett and Kathy started asking Beatrice to help out at their home, either in the cafe, on the farm, or with some rental work. When Garrett was about to leave the house, Kathy was already at the cafe. He knocked on Beatrice's bedroom door until she answered. "What do you want? This better be important." "I was asleep. It's time to get up, Bea. The calf has been at the cafe for an hour now. Are you going to help her there or come with me?" "What? Are you kidding? No, I'm not helping her. I'm not going with you. I have no interest in doing Kathy's busy work. Just leave me alone." "Bea, we talked about this last night. The easy days are over. If you don't start helping out, I might need to ask you to find another place to stay." "Just get away from my door and leave me alone," Bea shouted. Garrett stayed inside for about 15 more minutes than usual, making noise to keep Beatrice awake. He grinned every time she yelled at him to be quiet. Finally, he turned off the loud radio and got ready to go to the cafe for breakfast. Just before he stepped out, he paused and gave a cheeky smile. He went back into the living room, turned the radio back on to a country station Beatrice didn't like, and cranked up the volume. After that, he headed for the door again. He made sure to slam it hard as he left. He was laughing when he walked into the cafe. Kathy was at the cash register with a customer and smiled when she spotted him. After the customer left, Kathy chuckled and said, "I guess the princess isn't happy with you right now." "Nope, I don't think she is," he replied. She yelled at me to turn off the radio as I closed the door behind me. Kathy chuckled and said, "So that's our radio, huh?" I realized Jess, who lived upstairs, was up really early and playing his stereo much louder than usual. I hope he doesn't annoy the other renters. I hadn't thought about that. Well, it's too late now. If he doesn't turn it off soon, I'll go back and do it myself. Just then, they heard the radio stop, so we moved on and didn't dwell on it anymore. Kathy went back to the kitchen to make Garrett's breakfast. Garrett sat with some of the other guys, chatting while enjoying his first cup of coffee. About 30 minutes later, Bea walked into the cafe and sat at her usual table alone. After the waitress passed by her twice without stopping, Bea grabbed her on the third pass and snapped, "Aren't you going to take my order? I know you're not the best at your job, but you should notice that I haven't been served, especially since you're the only waitress here." Paula pulled her hand back from BA and said, "I know I haven't served you. Kathy told me not to. She said you have to take care of your own meals and clean up after yourself from now on. I'm sorry." She looked around and saw the other customers were watching her. Her face turned red. Then she stood up and walked to the kitchen. She pushed the swinging kitchen doors open so hard that they hit the wall. Everyone could hear her yelling at Kathy from across the room. "You can't tell that girl not to serve me," she shouted. "This is a place that serves food, right? I'm here for my breakfast and coffee." Kathy replied, "I'm sorry, but we told you last night that the free service is over. We only help paying customers. If you want to pay for your breakfast, we'll be glad to serve you. If not, you can cook your own food when we're not using the grill. When you're done, you can manage your own table too. If you're not a paying customer after that, you can either go back upstairs to clean up the house and do the laundry, or help clean the kitchen down here and set up for lunch. We serve paying customers, and until you find another place to live and come here as a paying customer, my staff won't be waiting on you like before." A worker rushed out of the kitchen, clearly upset. As she left, she complained under her breath. On her way out of the cafe, she grabbed a cup of coffee and a snack cake without paying for either. For the next few minutes, Garrett and Kathy heard her stomping around upstairs. Then it got quiet again. When Garrett left for work, he noticed BA's car was gone. He fixed a few things and 2 rental units before heading to the farm to catch up on some work there. He returned to the cafe for lunch and then went up to the apartment for the afternoon. When he arrived, he saw that B had grabbed the radio, unplugged it, and smashed it against the wall. The radio was broken, and the wall had a big dent. Garrett sighed and spent most of the afternoon fixing the damage. After he patched up the wall, he went out to the balcony to relax with Kathy. They both didn't see B all day. As evening approached, they made some sandwiches and headed to the farm and their favorite fishing spot. They fished, enjoyed some drinks, and relaxed until it was dark. While they were by the river, Garrett pulled Kathy closer and said, "I'm really sorry I have to leave you with the 304. If I had known this was going to happen, I would have told the guard that I couldn't go to OCS. I know this won't be easy for you. I have to leave in 10 days. Kathy replied, "Oh, don't worry. I can handle it. I'm not sure what to do about her, but I'll figure it out. You worked hard to become an officer, and you deserve this chance. Just go out there and do your best. Don't worry about us." When Garrett and Kathy came home, B still wasn't there. They talked for a little while, then took showers and went to bed. Around 3 a.m., a very drunk B burst into the apartment and stumbled loudly to her room. The next morning, Garrett made sure B was awake before he left. This time, B, still messy from sleep, threw her bedroom door open and pushed Garrett aside. She grumbled, "Listen, I told you yesterday that I won't do your chores. Now move away from my door and let me sleep." Garrett almost coughed from the smell of her breath. She reeked of alcohol as she made her way to the cafe for breakfast. She was not given any special treatment. This time, she came into the kitchen around 11:30 a.m. and asked for breakfast. Kathy told her again that if she wanted food, she could make her own plate. B paused for a moment and then huffed, "Fine." She went over to the stove and pushed the cook aside. But instead of making her breakfast, she took some of the lunch special that was meant for the other guests. After filling her plate, B walked back into the dining room, pushing past Kathy and the cook without a word. It was clear that even though she knew many people in the room, no one said anything to her either. As she entered the cafe and looked for a table, she noticed none of these people were her friends from high school, so she ignored them. She chose a table in a dark corner of the room. She quickly ate her meal, then stood up and strode out. In her mind, she felt like she was the best thing ever. She ruled over everything around her. She never took the time to clean up after her lunch. Instead, she left her dirty dishes on the table for the waitress to deal with later that night. The next few days were the same as before. It seemed that B closed the bar down and then, to our surprise, went home and stumbled upstairs to bed, drunk. Her mood didn't get any better in the morning when Garrett woke her up. She came to the cafe for her first meal of the day and, as usual, left the mess behind on that Friday. B didn't come home that night. Garrett and Kathy didn't hear from her until she walked in late on Sunday evening, looking terrible. She had marks on her neck and dark circles under her eyes. Garrett looked up when she entered and said, "Where have you been? We were really worried. Why didn't you answer your phone, or at least let us know you weren't coming home?" She replied, "Oh, just leave it. I'm free, white, and over 21. I can come and go as I want and do what I want. I was out with friends and we had a nice weekend. Now I'm tired. I'm heading to bed." Garrett felt angry. He looked at B and said, "That's enough. I want you out of this house tomorrow. I'm tired of paying all your bills without any help from you. You don't even care about keeping things clean. You're worse now than before. We already talked about this." B smiled and replied, "I'm not a maid. I don't clean or serve food or do other small jobs. If you find me a good-paying job, I'll work. But until then, deal with it." B turned and went to her room. Soon she came out, took a shower, and then went back to her room, closing the door and turning off the light. The next morning, like always, Garrett woke B up before he left. After B had her brunch, she went out to wherever she had planned to go. Garrett and Kathy went upstairs to pack all of B's things into bags and boxes. Garrett drove 17 miles to his mother's house with her belongings. When he got there, he couldn't open the door, so he left her things on the back porch. He noticed that the yard needed mowing and saw a "for sale" sign partly hidden by a bush near the mailbox. After that, he returned to Stella and changed the lock on their apartment. This way, B could not enter whenever she came back from her outings. Before he left, Garrett put a note on the door for her. He wrote that all her things were at their mother's house and that she could stay there for a bit. Just before 3 a.m., B stumbled up the stairs after a night out. This time, the door wouldn't open for her. She noticed the note on the door, took it off, and read it. After finishing the note, she started banging on the door and calling for Garrett. Finally, he got out of bed and walked to the door. He didn't open the door, but talked to me through it. He said, "B, we gave you lots of chances to help and stay here. You didn't want to help at all and were rude to Kathy and me. I warned you many times that if you didn't help and kept acting like a child, you would need to find another place to live. Now go on. I took all your things to Mom's today. You can stay with her for a while." "That's just not true. There's no way you could drive over 450 miles with my stuff and be back here in your bed. Just let me in so I can go to sleep. I'm really tired." "What are you talking about? Mom's place is only 17 miles away. What's this 450-mile thing? It's like you didn't know. Mom's work closed and she had to move to St. Joseph for her job. That's why her house is for sale. And you haven't seen her in 2 months? Just let me in." "Well, I didn't know. She never told me anything. And you didn't either. She still owns the house, I'm sure. So why don't you go there and stay? That's where all your stuff is." She kicked the door and made a hole in it, then stumbled back down the stairs to her car. Garrett followed her to the balcony and watched as she drove away. She wasn't driving too crazily, so he decided not to follow her or call the police about her drinking. Neither Kathy nor Garrett saw her again before he left for Oaks, but they started hearing stories about her. People said she was often at local bars with flashy city cowboys. It was said that she left with one of them regularly if they drove a nice car or an expensive pickup. The morning before he left, some guys at the cafe were teasing him about leaving Kathy to do all the work while he went off to play soldier. One of them said, "I thought summer camp wasn't until later in the year. Why are you leaving right after finishing college? What could take so long anyway? I hear you'll be away for almost 6 months. Oh, it's not too bad, I guess. They just want me to go to a training school. When I come back, I'll have a new job. I need this training for it." "Wow, I thought you were a medic. They can't turn you into a doctor in 6 months, can they?" So what's this all about? It covers many things. How to lead people, tactics, weapons, and more. Just regular army stuff. Mostly. Right. In other words, you found a way to get more money from the government. Meanwhile, Kathy is working hard at that cafe while you're off enjoying yourself. Garrett left Saturday for a long drive to Fort Benning, Georgia. He was going to attend Officer Candidate School, OCS, there, and then take the infantry basic course before coming back home. He was one of the lucky few who got to do his guard OCS with regular Army instructors instead of taking the course on weekends and during the summer with state teachers. He would finish the course and earn his commission in just over 6 months instead of 2 years. When Garrett came back, he made sure no one knew about the change in his status. He liked being seen as just one of the guys who didn't care much about rules. He probably had more money than most families in town, and with his guard pay, his income was just as good, if not better. This way, he could enjoy being part of the local crowd. After he returned, Garrett kept doing small repairs for GAM Properties, LLC, and worked on his small piece of land. Since these jobs didn't take up all his time, he had plenty of chances to fish and relax. He never went back to his part-time job with the construction company. His reputation as someone who didn't do much continued to grow. Once in a while, the local gossipers would say how sad it was that poor Kathy had to work so hard to support that lazy Wellman's boy. And on top of that, he was hardly ever home. He was often off pretending to be a soldier on Halloween. After Jeffrey and his new wife had been married for 17 months, they hosted a big Halloween party at their house, which used to belong to Beatrice, the old man's daughter. Jeffrey, as usual, noticed a young woman in a revealing costume at the party and started flirting with her. His wife saw this and got angry and jealous. She told him how she felt. As they drank more and more, their argument got louder and less careful. Finally, Jeffrey reached his limit and pushed her away. In response, she slapped him. Unfortunately, she was holding a new bottle of strong alcohol they had used to mix with the punch. When she threw it at him after he pushed her, It broke and spilled everywhere. This wouldn't have been too bad, but some of the flammable liquid splashed into a jack-o'-lantern that had a candle inside, and then, whoosh, the alcohol caught fire. The fire spread quickly through the house after the spilled alcohol caught the carpet. The flames reached the wooden parts of the home. It was past midnight, and the guests were very drunk, struggling to escape the burning building. Eventually, someone remembered to call the local fire department. They arrived in just 17 minutes after the call. Meanwhile, Jeffrey was in jail for hitting his wife, and his house was completely destroyed by the fire. The next morning, everyone at the cafe was talking about the party, the fire, and Jeffrey's arrest. Life went on for Garrett and Kathy as usual. Garrett spent his time hunting, fishing, and relaxing, doing his farm work only when necessary. He fixed rental properties or handled repairs when they had to be done. Garrett also helped the local guard a few days each year. Kathy would join him for hunting and fishing when she wasn't busy at the cafe or store and when he was home. Jeffrey's behavior kept his friends talking all winter after his fight with his wife. He was found guilty of assault, and this time the judge was someone new because his regular judge was out due to a serious surgery. The new judge looked at Jeffrey's past problems. After hearing from everyone involved, the judge decided Jeffrey should spend a year in jail. While he was in jail, Penny filed for divorce. Because of the assault, she managed to break the prenup she had to sign. In the end, she walked away from their marriage with almost all of Jeffrey's money, about $1.70 million. The judge decided that the house, land, and other belongings Jeffrey owned were worth that much, so Penny got half of everything they had together. Sadly for Jeffrey, the insurance company did not pay for the fire. They said he was responsible for it while he was committing a crime. Penny throwing the bottle at Jeffrey was reported as him hitting her so hard that it fell from her hands and broke. This allowed the alcohol to spill onto the candle and start the fire. While this could have happened, it was not the truth. Yet the record said otherwise. In the spring, after Jeffrey got out of jail, he and his father came into the cafe during breakfast and sat down at Garrett's table without asking. In this small cafe, it was common for people to sit together, but usually they were familiar with each other. However, Garrett did not know the Godfreys well. Jeffrey had just been released from jail early due to overcrowding. Most people in town believed that Jeffrey's father had used his influence to get him out sooner, not just because of overcrowding. Whatever the case, Garrett started to rise from his seat as they joined him. Mr. Godfrey smiled at Garrett, but it felt forced. Garrett wasn't sure how to respond. He wanted to be polite, but thoughts of what happened before lingered in his mind. He took a deep breath and prepared to greet them. The atmosphere was tense, and he could feel eyes watching from other tables. "Good morning," Garrett finally said, trying to sound friendly. Jeffrey just nodded, avoiding eye contact. The awkward silence hung in the air, and Garrett wondered how long this uneasy breakfast would last. Godfrey the Elder touched his arm gently and said, "Please, Mr. Mans, I have a business idea to share with you. Can we talk for a moment?" Garrett hesitated, but then leaned back in his chair. "I guess so, but I can't think of any business we might have with each other. You know that Jeffrey got the house and property when he divorced your sister. I'm sure you've heard about the bad luck he had with a fire and the troubles he faced with the woman he married after Beatrice. I won't go into details about his problems, but they might be a chance for you. I understand that your family has owned the 20 acres he now has for over 100 years before he got it in the divorce. He really needs some money right now. We thought you might want to buy back the land for a fair price." Garrett frowned. He would really like to get the land back again. He wondered what the Godfreys thought was a fair price, and how they might try to take advantage of him if he made the deal. What he actually said was, "I might be interested, but I'm sure you know I don't have a good, high-paying job. I only do a bit of crop farming and manage some rental units for a local company. The money I get helps us eat. Meanwhile, Kathy barely makes enough at the cafe and store. We thought about your situation, and I believe I have a way for you to buy the land and bring that small piece back with the family farm. Around here, land usually sells for about $2,500 an acre, without any updates. We would sell you the 20 acres for $46,000, and we'd be happy to carry the loan with no down payment. You could make payments directly to my property management company. We would set up the loan to be paid off over 10 years. The monthly payments for the loan would be about $534.10 at a 7% interest rate each year. However, after 3 years, the amount left to pay would suddenly be due unless we could arrange another loan. What do you think? I'm not sure. I really don't want to take on that kind of loan. What if I can't pay it off in 3 years? Mr. Godfrey smiled and said, "Oh, it's nothing serious. I'm sure we can find a solution. Just think, you would have the whole farm back together. We would need some kind of guarantee to make the loan work. We would ask for the rest of your land to secure the loan. That's how we can do it, with no money down and no penalties if you want to pay it off early. But what if I'm late or miss a payment?" Mr. Godfrey laughed and said, "Come on, we're neighbors. Being a day or two late isn't a problem. And if you miss a payment, you just pay a small fee and catch up as soon as you can. There wouldn't be a problem with paying off the loan early. If you can get that kind of money, I will be happy to take it." Both Godfrey men laughed after he said that and gave Garrett a teasing look. "It seems too good to be true, but I really want to have the old place back together. Let me talk to Kathy first. Could you both wait a moment, please?" The Godfrey men smiled, and the older Godfrey said, "Of course, talk to your wife. If you need her opinion to make a choice, that's fine. Not every man can make business deals on his own." Garrett felt a wave of anger at that comment, but forced a smile and said, "Thank you. I'll be quick." He went into the kitchen and quickly explained to Kathy what the Godfreys were offering. He said, "I really want to bring the land back together, and I can use the extra farmland too. Also, I think this is a good chance to show those guys that we mean business. I'll make sure they write in the contract that we can pay off the loan early. Instead of letting them keep the loan, we will give them a check when we finish the deal. This way, they won't earn any interest on the land. I feel like they are trying to take the rest of the farm because they don't know we have the money. They think I won't make the payments since I only work part-time. Then, they can take the rest of the old farm. If you want to go ahead with it, that's fine by me. But how will we include this in G-CAM with everything else? Well, we can just buy the land and then do another quitclaim deed to transfer it to G-CAM. It might cost a bit more, but it shouldn't raise any questions. Plus, when we pay him with a cashier's check, we'll say that I sold it to GAM for a quick and big profit. You know, I've been wanting to get a new truck. I'll tell him I sold it to them along with the other land, so I could have the money to buy a nice truck and keep my good name. I'm sure he'll believe me, and I'm also sure he'll be really angry that he missed out on what he thought would be a big win. This is going to be fun." Garrett came back to the table looking worried. The Godfreys looked scared. The chance had slipped away. Garrett said, "I just don't know. Kathy really doesn't think we can handle the payments, and she doesn't think we need the extra land." He continued, "She says I don't take good care of what I have, and she doesn't want a bigger burden." "Well, maybe we can find a solution," I said. "Don't give up. What if we lower the price to $2,000 an acre and raise the interest to 8%, then cut the loan length to 8 years? We need to keep the monthly payments around $500. That would help Jeffrey balance his budget. This could be a good deal for you. You can get the land for much less per acre than it's really worth. You only need to pay for it for 8 years, and then it will be completely yours. But I know Cass is going to be mad at me about this. I'll ask Grandpa's lawyer to help us with the agreement." "Oh, you don't need to do that," said Mr. Godfrey. "I have a simple real estate contract in my car. We can just fill it out and it'll work fine." He turned to Jeffrey and said, "Go grab my briefcase from the car so we can finish this." Mr. Godfrey finished the contract quicker than Scott, signed it, and then gave the pages to Garrett to sign. Garrett looked over the contract and started to sign it. Then he pretended to hesitate and said, "I'm not sure. I really think I should have Grandpa's lawyer check this. It says here that if I miss a payment or if I'm late, you can take back the land as a penalty. That's not what you told me would happen." "Don't worry, mister," Godfrey replied, pointing to a part of the contract. "This part says you can make a late payment if everyone agrees. And over here it mentions that you can pay it off early, like you asked. That's not an issue. This wording is in all contracts, but it's mainly there for legal reasons. Anyway, I can have my grandfather's lawyer look it over. Can I call you in a day or two to set up the signing and other details? Well, if you're unsure, we can wait a couple of days." But this offer might not be available for long. If someone else wants to buy the land and offers a better deal, we would have to consider it. I get it. I'm likely to sign, but I need to be sure. You know, after the Godfreys left, it felt different. Garrett called Mr. Douglas and set up a meeting to discuss the contract. He got an appointment for the next morning. After Mr. Douglas reviewed the contract, he said, "I'm really glad you didn't sign this. The only good part about the whole contract is the part where you can pay off the loan early. That's what I'm focused on. I plan to get back at Mr. Godfrey for how he treated me and tried to take advantage of me. He thinks he can use this agreement to take our farm. I know I'm right about that. I want the land. He is asking almost $1,000 less for each acre than it is really worth. Plus, I'll beat him out of the extra money he thinks he'll make until I can no longer pay back the loan. I plan to pay cash for the land the day we make the deal. I'll sign the papers, and then after that I'll give him a certified check for the full loan amount. This will force him to accept that I've paid in advance. He will lose the land and the extra money he hoped to earn. I also hope he gets angry. I will make this payment from GCAM and tell him I sold the land to them for $3,000 an acre. I want to buy a new truck. He has no clue about how much money we have, and he will think and hopefully say in his angry talks that the almost villain sold the family farm for a new truck. This will make my messy reputation even stronger. Douglas, can you look over the contract again?" He asked this a few times, made some notes, and then said, "I think it will work. Do you want me at the closing to help with the paperwork?" "Yes, definitely. Should I call him now to see when we can finish the deal?" After Garrett answered, Mr. Douglas leaned back in his chair. He said, "I worry about how you want to seem like someone with little money. You are a very successful man, yet you make it seem like you have nothing. You hold a position in the National Guard and are a company commander, which is a big deal. Still, you let everyone think you are just an average soldier. Why do you choose to do that?" "I'm not really sure. At first I was just a nobody with no clear goal. I enjoyed living freely without a steady income. It really annoyed the nosy people, and I loved that. Now it's just become a habit for me. I don't want to come off as showing off. What can I say? Hey everyone, I have a lot of money in the bank and nice properties, and I'm an important leader in the Guard. You should respect me now." "No, that's not right. You have a good role in the community and you shouldn't hide it. That's just odd. I'm proud of what I do, but I don't want to boast. The people who need to know about my life do. The ones who don't need to know don't. At least now I see that my friends like me for who I am, not for my money or my job." After saying this, Garrett made a call and smiled. While he talked with Mr. Godfrey, the older Garrett said, "Mr. Godfrey, my lawyer says this contract isn't good for me, but if I really want to sign it, he can't stop me. I really want that land, so I'm going to go ahead with it. He confirmed what you told me about the deal. So we'll proceed with it. That's why I'm calling. Can we sign the papers at my lawyer's office tomorrow? Well, now I can't leave the office tomorrow. But if you just want to come by here and sign the papers, we can do that. I handle a lot of my contracts right here in my office." Garrett looked at Mr. Douglas, who nodded back at him. "Yes," Garrett said. "Okay, Mr. Godfrey. We'll be there around 10 in the morning. Is that all right?" "Great. We'll see you then," Godfrey replied. Garrett heard Godfrey laughing before the call ended. The next morning, just as Garrett had hoped, he, Kathy, and Mr. Douglas arrived at Godfrey's office just before 10 a.m. They were led into Godfrey's office, where he and Jeffrey were waiting with smiles. Their smiles faded a bit when they saw Mr. Douglas, but they did not say anything before the meeting began. Douglas took a recorder out of his briefcase and turned it on. "I record all our meetings," he said. "This way we can both be clear about what we talked about and what we agreed on. Is it all right if we record this meeting as well?" "That's not how we usually do things here," Godfrey Sr. replied. "I'm afraid that's not up for discussion, sir. I must insist on it." "Oh, fine," Godfrey Sr. said, not looking pleased. "If you think it's necessary." Douglas placed the recorder on the table next to him, then took out a contract from his briefcase and handed it to Godfrey Sr. "I told my client that this contract is quite unfair to him and that he shouldn't sign it, but he really wants to move forward. I'm just here to help with the process," he continued. "If you could please look over this contract, which I've been told is ready, we can finish our business today." "All right, let me take a look," Godfrey Sr. said. "Yes, this is the contract I prepared for Mr. Client. A few days ago, I got the papers from Mr. and Mrs. Mans. I can see my signature is still on it. If Mr. and Mrs. Mans can sign now, we can finish the deal. However, there is a small issue. I noticed that your son Jeffrey hasn't signed the contract yet. My research shows he is the owner of the property we are talking about. That is technically correct, but my company looks after all the family business. I am the president, so I usually sign the business papers. I understand, but the owner of the property also needs to sign these documents. Alternatively, you should provide a power of attorney so you can sign for him. I must insist, as that is the legal way to handle this. Mr. Godfrey glared at Douglas and handed the contract to Jeffrey. He said angrily, "Just sign this where I marked it, Jeffrey." While JR was signing, Elder turned to Douglas and said, "The signature area shows I'm signing for Jeffrey. I promise you this is all legal." Mr. Douglas smiled and said, "Please bear with me. Now we know for sure that this is a real contract." Jeffrey slid the papers over to Garrett and Kathy, and they quickly signed their names with big smiles. Godfrey Sr. picked up the signed contract and said, "Thank you. My assistant will send you your copy in about a week. Now, I have another meeting, so I need to ask you to leave. I'm sorry, but we need our copy of the contract right now. There's one more thing we need to discuss before we go. I want to make sure there's no penalty for paying off this loan early. Can Mr. Mans pay you back whenever he wants? Is that right?" "Yes, of course," said Godfrey. "It says in the contract that he can pay it off completely at any time. He has enough money to do that." Godfrey laughed and turned away from the three people sitting across the desk. Godfrey Sr. handed some papers to his secretary and said, "Here, please make a copy for each of us, and make sure everyone gets 2 copies and 1 original. Hurry, I have another meeting." After the secretary came back and gave out the papers, Godfrey stood up and walked toward the door. As he left the table, he said, "I really have to get to my next meeting now." "I'm sure Darla can show you the way out," Mr. Douglas said. "But not so fast, please. Mr. Mance has already sold this land. He wants to pay you now to settle this loan so he can transfer it to the next buyer. I need you to take his check and give him a receipt for the payment. Then mark the contract as paid in full," Mr. Douglas continued. "What? You can't do that. The agreement was that we would keep the loan and you would make payments to us. We never said you could sell the land." "This is unacceptable," replied Godfrey, sounding upset. "Mr. Godfrey, I must insist," Mr. Douglas said firmly. "I have a certified check from the Bank of Arkham Properties, LLC, for the loan balance. They have paid off Mr. Mann so he can finish the sales contract with them. Please prepare a receipt for this check and mark the contract as paid in full. After that, we can leave and you can go to your next meeting. We'll handle the filing of the deeds and paperwork, so you don't have to pay for that." "No, I can't do that. This is not what we agreed on before. If Arkham wants this land, they need to talk to me, and we can make a deal." "Sir, they can't talk to you. You don't own this land, and neither does your son. My client owns it, and he has sold it. I should remind you that this conversation is being recorded. The recording can be used as evidence in court if we need to." The Godfreys glared at Garrett and Douglas, and the elder one shouted, "You dirty crooks!" He took a receipt book and wrote out a receipt, then marked "paid in full" on the contract. He made copies and tossed the originals to Douglas, telling him to get out of his office. As they were leaving, but still close enough to hear, Garrett put his arm around Kathy and said, "I think that was the easiest $20,000 I've ever made." Suddenly, they heard a heavy noise. Senior shouted, "Damn those guys!" Garrett and Kathy thought about telling the town what the Godfreys had done, but decided it was better not to. Instead, they shared that he got a good deal on the old home place's 20 acres and had enough for a 50% down payment on a new truck. Of course, rumors started spreading. Everyone believed that if Garrett was telling the truth, the Godfreys let a good deal slip away. Garrett cleaned up the mess from the burned house and started to work on the land. He went fishing almost every day during the season. As winter came, Garrett switched to hunting to fill his free time. The seasons changed and new animals to hunt became available. Sometimes a local would make a comment about his life, often saying how they couldn't understand how he could spend so much time at the cafe and still hunt and fish. "I can barely keep up with my bills," they'd say. Garrett would just smile and respond, "Well, my grandpa taught me how to take it easy and enjoy life." I don't have many needs and not much I really want, so we get by just fine. I make a little money here and there, and then I take time to enjoy life with it." He added, "Things might get a bit tighter when the kids grow up and maybe go to college, but for now, we're doing great." Some of the local people, often the talkative church friends, often said in front of a man's family that it didn't seem fair. They thought it was strange that someone like Garrett and his family seemed to have such an easy life while they did not. These families worked hard just to get by, while Garrett only had a part-time job and still lived well. He seemed to live like his ancestors, staying in that old bank and watching the hard workers while enjoying life himself. It just didn't feel fair at all. For several years, a nice hotel on the edge of Neosho was having a tough time. It used to be a Ramada Inn. The hotel had 80 rooms, a big lobby, a lounge for drinks, and a large restaurant with an indoor pool and hot tub. In short, it was a typical Ramada hotel with many services. The hotel didn't succeed enough to keep the Ramada name, so it changed to a local name. Still, for some reason, the hotel continued to struggle and eventually closed down. The owner tried to keep the bar and restaurant open, but they also shut down, and soon a big piece of land was up for sale. Garrett and Kathy passed by the lovely brick building many times. Even though it looked nice on the outside, Garrett often remarked on the missed chances for the old building. One day he said, "I don't understand why someone doesn't buy that building and turn it into apartments and shops. They could put a small convenience store and a gas station on the corner and use the lobby for that. A little restaurant and bar could also do really well since there would be people living there." He added, "They could even keep about 20 rooms for rent like a small motel. If they didn't rent out all the rooms, they could change some into apartments too. Out of the 80 rooms, if they changed 60 into apartments, they could make 10 two-bedroom apartments and 20 one-bedroom apartments. That would leave 20 rooms to rent. Those could be rented weekly or used as hotel rooms. If the apartments were all rented, they could make about $17,000 each month. It's hard to know how much money could come from the bar, restaurant, convenience store, and gas sales, but I think it could do well. If the owner didn't want to run those businesses, he could charge a fair rent for the space and take a part of the total earnings. I believe this plan could really work." After he finished speaking, Kathy said, "It seems like either you are the only one who sees this idea for the building, or something else is stopping people from moving forward. It's been on the market for too long for a reason. You need to take action, or at least explore the options." They stopped at the red light next to the building when the talk happened. Kathy took out her notepad and wrote down the phone number of the agent. As Garrett drove away when the light turned green, Kathy called the agent. As soon as she said why she was calling, his voice changed. He seemed very eager for her to meet him there. He told her he could be there right away if she could come. Kathy looked at Garrett and said, "The agent can meet us at the hotel now if we want to. He really seems anxious." Garrett sighed and replied, "I guess we could. We have plenty of time and our other tasks won't take long." "Okay, but I still feel like something isn't right or the building would have sold already. We need to be very careful with this." Garrett and Kathy learned that the hotel was part of an estate. The person in charge wanted to sell it quickly to finish everything up. The hotel was listed for $1.3 million, down from $2.70 million. Garrett smiled at Kathy and said, "That sounds a bit high, but I might think about it if everything goes well. Of course, we need to check things out closely. I want to look at the building to see what needs fixing and updating. Can we have the keys, or do you want to be with us while we check the place?" The other person replied, "I thought that was the plan for today. Right now, we are just looking to see if we're interested in buying it. I think we might be, but I need to know how much more money I will need to spend to make it ready to rent out if we decide to buy." Garrett then asked, "How long do you think that will take?" "I'm not really sure," was the answer. "I believe I can finish my inspection in about 3 or 4 days if I can get into the building. But I can't stay here with you for that long. I'm sorry, but it just won't work. So, I think you should find someone to stay with us during the inspection. If we can't be alone in the building, we might have to back out of the deal. I really don't want to buy something without knowing what I'm getting into. I need to see the building closely to understand its condition. I'm very hesitant to make any offer until I know more about the building. Of course, any offer would depend on the seller providing a clear title. They would also need to fix any major problems or give a cash discount for them. What would you need to make an offer right now? My seller really wants to sell this building. As I mentioned, this building is part of an estate and needs to be sold so the executor can finish their work. The seller is very eager to sell. Let my wife and I talk for a few minutes and then we'll see what happens. I'm not making any promises. You understand we are just checking the place for our employer, right? If we decide to buy, it will be Arcanum Properties LLC that finalizes the deal. That's no issue at all. How about I step aside so you two can chat for a bit? If you'd like, I can talk about this building with someone at Arkham Properties. No, that's not needed. We have the power to negotiate and sign contracts for the business. Kathy watched the agent walk away, then turned to Garrett. She asked, "What are you thinking? You can't be considering making an offer before we explore every room and see their condition. We still don't know if the heating or cooling systems work or what state the roof is in. All we know right now is that the public areas of the building are a mess." Well, we do know a bit more than that. I walked into the restrooms by the bar and cafe, and they looked quite old and need some work. The decorations in the restaurant and bar are not great, and so is the lobby. The pool area has a plain concrete floor and dull cinder block walls. I didn't notice any leaks in the roof in the public areas. I think we should make a very low offer. If they say no, we can tell them we're ready to walk away if we don't get to look around properly. All right, you're in charge. What price did you have in mind? I was thinking of starting with $500,000. If they turn that down, I can go up to $750,000. Kathy laughed and said, "You're too nice. We could take everything out inside for that price and still make a profit. Go for it." When the agent saw the couple coming toward him, he grinned and asked, "Should I put in the offer at the asking price? I promise you that the building is a great deal at that price. You couldn't build this place back for less than about $4 million. We're ready to make an offer, but not for that much. Since you won't allow us to check the building closely, we can only pay $500,000. Please put that in an offer with the agreement to move in as soon as the deal is done, and we'll give it a try. Of course, we will need a title search to make sure we have clear ownership, just like usual. We also need to check for termites and do general inspections that are normally required in sales. You can talk to Kathy here for the right wording for the contract. She works with another agency and knows how this part of the business goes." When the agent heard our offer, his face fell and his smile faded. He quickly pulled out his papers from his briefcase and started to fill them in. But as he worked, he said, "I really don't think the executor will accept this offer. It feels a bit low. I have to say I think it's best he doesn't take the offer." Well, you both have to make your own choices. But remember, this property has been for sale for 3 years. I bet we are the first to make an offer in that time. After they signed the paperwork, Garrett and Kathy went on with their errands, and the agent went to get news about their offer. 2 days later, Garrett got a call from the agent. After the usual friendly talk, the agent said, "Mr. Mann, who is in charge, agrees with me about the price you offered for the motel. He turned it down, but he has a different offer. He will sell the place for $1 million. No way, that's not happening. I think I may have offered too little. I'll raise my offer to $600,000. The agent was taken aback and said, "That just won't work. I'm sorry we couldn't make a deal." "Yeah, me too. Tell him to be more fair. My offer will be open until I get a signed refusal or until 3 weeks pass." That next Monday, Garrett got another call from the agent. This time, the agent was so eager to please, it made Garrett uncomfortable. The agent said, "Mr. Mann, congratulations. You have bought a motel. We just need a small increase in the price." The agent explained, "The executor will take $675,999 for the property as it is. Can you agree to that, please?" Garrett didn't think long before saying, "Okay, it's a deal. I assume you will bring the signed contract to our office so we can sign it and give you some deposit money?" "Yes, sir. I can be there in about an hour if that works for you." It took more than 2 months to finalize the deal on the motel. After that, Garrett spent the next month checking every room and area, making notes about the things he needed to fix in the building. Sadly, this building was in an area with rules about how buildings should be built and used. This meant he had to follow those rules. All the work had to be done by skilled workers who had the right licenses and had to be checked by building inspectors. Luckily, Garrett had all the needed licenses for building, plumbing, and electrical work, so he could do most of the tasks himself. His plan was to fix one floor at a time. They would rent out the floors at lower prices until all the work was done. Then they would raise the rent to the final amount. It took Garrett 13 months to make the first apartments on the second floor ready for renters. He also fixed up the pool area and filled the pool and spa so the future tenants could enjoy them. The common area was improved too, but the bar and restaurant were left as they were for now. After this, he started working on the first floor again, which took nearly a year to finish. When it was time to advertise the first floor for rent, he was surprised by the response. Garrett got a phone call from the director of housing at the local college. They wanted to rent the whole floor for extra student housing. They offered to pay the standard price for the rooms and would sign a 3-year contract if Garrett agreed. He and Kathy were excited about the deal. Now they just needed to get approval to put in gas pumps and open the convenience store, and they also needed to finish the bar and restaurant. These projects became very important since all the apartments were rented out. They hoped the college students would buy a lot from the 3 small businesses if they could open them. They even offered one of the smaller offices to be used as a study and lounge area for the students. It took Garrett another 6 months and a lot of money to get these 3 projects done, but he succeeded. The bar was the first business they opened, and it started making money right away. The convenience store and gas station were just about making enough money to cover their costs, and the restaurant was only bringing in around $1,000 each month. They decided to keep all 3 businesses running for at least 2 years, unless they started losing money fast, to see if things would get better. Soon after finishing the building, 2 important things happened that would affect Garrett's work life. They got a deal to rent the hotel's meeting rooms to a political party for their gatherings. Garrett was free that evening, so he opened the rooms for the meeting and stayed nearby to help if needed. While he was there, he met some important people in state politics for the first time. He had been promoted to major 3 years earlier and recognized some of the names. When they learned he was in the National Guard, they started asking if he knew certain people. Over the next 3 years, Arkham Properties grew, and Garrett got more involved in local government, meeting important people in both the Guard and politics. He was promoted to Lieutenant Colonel, which is LTC, and moved to a new job at the state headquarters of the National Guard. 4 years later, he was promoted again to full colonel and took on even more responsibilities. Now, he spent almost 2 weeks each month at the state capitol or traveling the state for Guard work. Most of that time, he was on active duty. His friends in town still joked about how often he was away for Guard events. One morning, as he was having breakfast before another trip, one of his friends said, "What do you even do for the Guard, Garrett? It seems like you're always off to meetings or something." "Oh, I'm mostly just telling them how to manage things now and making sure they are doing it correctly." Everyone laughed at that. Garrett's group had always been several miles away from home, and he still hadn't shared his rank or job. So they all believed he was just an average sergeant trying to take it easy. 2 more years and another election were coming up. This time, one of Garrett's friends, a state senator, was running for governor. One evening, they were sitting in a little bar near the Capitol talking about the election when his friend said, "I think I can win this, but I need money. If I don't find some soon, I'll have to stop my ads and let go of most of my staff. That will be like giving the election to Monty, and we know what that means. Oh, for sure. He really doesn't like me. I crossed him a few years ago when he tried to get his nephew an easy job at headquarters that he wasn't ready for. He's been after me ever since. If he gets elected, I might have to quit. On top of that, he would ruin the state. His friends and their shady deals would bring us to financial ruin. We're already in a difficult spot. What would you need to keep going?" Cedric laughed and said, "You mean besides a miracle? I'm spending about $25,000 a week now. The election is in 3 weeks, and I need to spend more on advertising to overpower him. To do that, I would at least need to double what I'm spending each week. So, if I'm understanding you correctly, you need at least $150,000 more to make it to the election. I might be able to help with that, but I don't really know much about the rules for donations. If I find the money, can your team handle it so we don't get in trouble?" "Absolutely, that's their job." But where would you even get that kind of money? I have a little bit of money saved up, but I can get more from Arkham Properties. How can you get anything from them? I didn't know you were connected with them. Garrett looked around and spoke softly. He said, "What I'm about to share is a secret. My family and I have worked very hard for years to keep this quiet. When I'm not doing guard work or helping out on the farm, I do repairs for Arkham. I used to handle everything by myself, but now the company has grown so much that they hire several repair workers full-time. My wife and her mother also work part-time in the office." Cedric jumped in with a laugh and said, "Oh, come on, Garrett, we're friends. But now you tell me your other job is as a repair worker for Arkham, and you think you can get them to give you that kind of money? I'm almost offended. What makes you think they will even talk to you about giving a donation, let alone give me one?" Garrett felt his anger rising. He almost stood up and walked away from his friend. But then he remembered what was important and took a deep breath. He tried to calm down before he said, "Yes, a whole thing. I think I can get them to write you a check. But if you could just keep quiet for a second, maybe I can explain." Cedric's face turned red when Garrett spoke to him like that. His eyes narrowed as he glared at Garrett. "Garrett, we're friends. That's the only reason you're not in trouble right now. No one talks to me like that. No one. You are pushing your luck. I think we should just leave before one of us says something that could ruin our friendship." Garrett looked at Cedric for a moment and then said, "Listen, just give me a minute and stop acting like you're better than me. As I was saying, my family and I are very careful about who we share our secrets with. But yes, I know I can get our camera to approve a payment of $150,000 if we follow the rules." Cedric stared at Garrett. The man was so sure of himself that it caught him off guard, especially with the bird sitting on his shoulders. He decided to trust him for now and see what Garrett would explain. Taking a deep breath, he asked, "Okay, how are you going to do that?" Garrett smiled and said, "I own Arkham. They usually listen to me. You own Arkham? You own the biggest property management company in Southwest Missouri. I thought you said you were just one of the maintenance workers." Cedric frowned as he continued, "How did you manage that? Even more, how could you keep it a secret? Wait, that doesn't matter. Would you really do this for me?" Garrett narrowed his eyes for a moment before replying, "What will this cost me?" Garrett looked right at him and said, "Less than you think. We both understand what the state needs right now. I want you to stay true to your beliefs and not let outside groups influence you while you're in office. That's all. I'm happy in my job and want to stay in a top role for as long as I can. I really don't want anything else." Cedric smiled and reached out to shake hands with Garrett. When they shook hands, Cedric said, "It's a done deal. I'll have my team contact you or whoever you prefer to take care of the details." Just 2 days after their talk, Cedric's campaign and his political party used funds given to them to inform voters about Cedric's plans. They quickly reached out to good old Monty. Monty thought he had Cedric in trouble, so he relaxed. But even if he hadn't, his funds were running low, just like Cedric's had been. He couldn't keep up with the spending and lost support. His party couldn't fill in the gaps in his money fast enough. The day before the election, polls showed Cedric ahead by almost 11%. When Monty heard that, he scowled. "Where did that jerk get the extra money? I thought we had him beat." "We would have if he hadn't found money at the last minute. I need to find out where it came from and do something about it." It was election day. Dawn was bright and sunny. To my surprise, more people showed up to vote than usual, and most of them were for Cedric. 2 hours after the polls closed, the news said Cedric would win the election for governor by 67% to 33%. Garrett and Kathy were at Cedric's campaign office for his celebration party. As Cedric moved around the room, he stopped to talk to Garrett and Kathy. He shook Garrett's hand and said, "I couldn't have done this without you. I owe you a lot. I won't forget what you told me in our meeting, Garrett. I need to talk to some people now to make things happen. But they will happen. You can count on it." The next morning, Garrett and Kathy went home and Cedric started organizing his plans. One of the first things he did was assign a trusted team member to speed up his first appointment. 3 weeks later, the team member came to Cedric and said, "Governor, everything is ready. All you need to do is announce it, and then General Manns must fill out some forms. The National Guard Bureau will help make his appointment official. Luckily, he already met all the education requirements, so it was just a matter of getting a few small permissions and finding the right people to handle the paperwork. "Great. Please get him on the phone for me," Cedric said. When Garrett picked up the phone, the aide said, "Please hold for the governor-elect." General Garrett frowned as he looked at the phone while waiting for Cedric to speak. Kathy noticed his expression and asked, "What's wrong, honey? You look puzzled." One of Cedric's helpers called and asked me to wait for Cedric. He called me General, which surprised me since I thought all the helpers knew I was just a colonel. Then Cedric got on the phone and said, "Hello, General. Thank you for waiting. I'm sorry it took me a while to get back to you, but we had to work hard to get everything ready for you. When can you come back to Jefferson City for a news conference? Your appointment will be shared tonight for tomorrow's papers." He added, "The state office will need you here soon to finish some forms, too." I replied, "What? Were you not paying attention, General? I understand what you said. I just don't get this general title. I'm a colonel." Cedric said, "You helped me before, and now I want to help you. I promised you could stay in the Guard in a higher role if I got elected. I keep my promises, General. They need to take care of your paperwork and start giving you information to help you get ready for your new job. You also need to find an assistant and decorate your office if you want to. I don't get what you mean by assistant in an office. Seriously, man. Have you been drinking or something? I promised you that you would be named Adjutant General if I got elected. And now you are. Are you saying you have changed your mind?" "No, I'm just thinking about being Adjutant General. I'm just trying to figure it all out." Cedric laughed and relaxed a bit. He said, "I get it. I felt the same way when they said I won the election too. You'll get used to it. Now, when can you come up here the day after tomorrow? That's soon enough. I need to finish a couple of things here tomorrow, and I want to bring Kathy with me, so she'll need to find someone to take over her work." Garrett hung up the phone and almost fell back into his chair. His face looked pale. Kathy walked over and asked with concern, "What's wrong, honey? You look almost ill." Garrett shook his head and looked at her. He pulled her onto his lap and said, "I just got a new job." "That's great. What is it? Is that why we have to go to Jefferson City?" "Yeah, but that's not all. We'll be moving there for at least 4 years, maybe 8. You need to either close the cafe or find someone to run it. Oh, and things are going to get tough tomorrow morning." "I'll come to the cafe to help you out," she offered. "Why would we move? I like it here. I thought you did too." "I do, but this new job is full-time and I have to do it in the capital." Cedric thought that when I gave him the campaign money, I was making a deal. All I wanted was to stay in the Guard in a senior role. He has made me the state adjutant general. If I don't mess up, I'll have the job for 8 years. Assuming he gets elected again after leaving his current job, we can retire and come back here. Trust me, retiring as a major general is a lot better than retiring as a simple colonel, just like he thought. The cafe was crazy the next morning. To make things worse, the news about his new job as adjutant general also said that he and his wife were the owners of the biggest property management company in the southwest area of the state, Arkham Properties. When Garrett walked into the cafe that morning, all the noise stopped and everyone turned to look at him. When he sat down in his usual spot, you could have heard a pin drop. Finally, the bold Trevor broke the silence. He said, "You sneaky guy! You own Arkham Properties and we never knew. You told us you were just a maintenance man, but you're actually a general in the Guard. Why didn't you tell us? You always said you gave the soldiers tasks and checked to see they were done. You made us think you were some kind of leader. But I didn't mislead anyone. I did help with repairs at Arkham when I had free time. I gave the soldiers things to do and I did keep an eye on them. I just didn't brag about my work or tell everyone what I did all the time. It didn't really matter to me. I had my friends and lived life the way I wanted. I enjoyed hunting and fishing and doing what made me happy. If I had been stuck in an office running the company, I wouldn't have had time for those things. We had people helping with the management, and my mother-in-law and Kathy took care of the accounts and everyday tasks. Slowly, the noise around us got back to its usual level. As you could guess, Garrett was the main topic, and the local paper was being passed around a lot. Every time he looked around, Garrett noticed someone watching him. Kathy made her head cook the manager of their cafe and small store when she and Garrett moved to Jefferson City. Neither of them ever felt completely at ease living in the capital or going to the fancy parties and events that Garrett's job required. However, they liked the chance to travel that his job offered. Whenever Garrett had a meeting in a different place, he would take Kathy along, and they often turned the trip into a little vacation. In their 7th year in office, Garrett and Kathy built a new house on the farm to use as their retirement home. When the governor finished his term, Garrett announced he was retiring, and they needed to find someone new to take his place. When Garrett retired and came home, one of the first things he did was buy a new John boat for fishing. As soon as the fishing season started, he and Kathy spent their time on the river, fishing and enjoying their later years. Both of their children followed in Garrett's footsteps and were working in jobs related to their time in the Guard. They also enjoyed fishing and relaxing by the riverbank. It seemed like Garrett had raised another group of laid-back kids. This new generation got people talking in the community. Everyone noticed they had money, but were mostly having fun instead of spending it carelessly. Thanks for listening to One Infidelity Hit. If you liked what you heard, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and drop us a like.